taxation, taxation and incentives. This legislation can play a crucial role in shaping the taxation policies related to the aviation sector, the offering of tax incentives to airlines, aviation-related businesses, and investors to make Nigeria a more attractive destination for investment. Some of this can include reducing import duties, having free trade zones, tax breaks for airport development projects, and other financial and structure development and modernization efforts. The legal framework for airports and airspace management is also very important, for which creating a comprehensive legal framework for airports and airspace management is vital. This framework will address issues such as airport ownership, management contracts, lease agreements, air traffic management, amongst other operational things. Clear and well-defined legislation in these areas can attract investors and more capital into Africa, which is what we need. The legislation also will help provide support for aviation education and training, for which investing in the education and training of aviation professionals is very critical, where we can allocate resources for the establishment of aviation training institutes and scholarships for students pursuing aviation-related degrees. In conclusion, legislative support is the backbone for which we know that we can be able to reposition Nigeria's aviation sector for revenue generation and sustainable growth. Establishing a robust regulatory framework, offering tax incentives, allocating funding, raising capital through PPPs, and a legal framework for the aviation management. This, we know, will help unlock the full potential of the Nigerian aviation sector. Legislation, when used wisely, can propel our nation's aviation sector to new heights, driving economic prosperity for all and sundry. Thank you very much for your attention. I wish us all a fruitful deliberation as we proceed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Muyiwa. We're very grateful for your presentation. I will now invite Barrister Allen Onyema, the chairman of Airpeace. But before he takes on, before he speaks, let me just do a brief introduction of Barrister Onyema. Barrister Allen Onyema is a well-known figure in the Nigerian aviation industry. He is the founder and chairman of Airpeace Airline, a private flight servicing agency that operates both domestically and internationally. Airpeace has grown to become the largest carrier in West Africa and Central Africa, employing over 3,000 staff. Barrister Onyema is not only a successful businessman, but also a philanthropist with a strong nationalistic orientation. He has a commendable track record of deploying resources to key initiatives aimed at promoting peaceful coexistence and productively engaging Nigerian youth. Barrister Onyema, you can now speak. I thought I saw Barrister Onyema here.
Okay, can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you, sir. Welcome.
Okay, am I audible enough?
I can hear you. Yes, I can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I thank you all for giving me the opportunity to speak on this all-important topic. To me, I would like to bring out the challenges we are having in the aviation sector, and at the same time talking about how legislation can help cure some of these maladies. It has come at a very good time. I think we should have even titled it Legislative Revolution Inevitable. At this point in time, it's inevitable. Let me, run you down to the challenges, because if you don't, our people say, if you don't know where it starts beating you, you might not even know where it has stopped. So it's very important to, at this stage, to look at those challenges. What are the causes? How do we now remedy them using legislation? The airline industry, the airlines have borne the flag of criticisms in this country, as if everything that has gone wrong in the country must have been caused by the poor airlines. Nobody is coming to the rescue of these airlines. Why is it that I read the intro this morning, where it is said that over 150 airlines have come and gone. The mortality rate of airlines in Nigeria is the highest anywhere in the world. It's not something to celebrate. But I want to point out something. The owners of these airlines must have been successful businessmen in other fields of endeavor. Why is it that in aviation, they've all failed, or most of them have failed? Yes, I agree to some extent that the ownership structure of the airlines may be blamed, but that is about 5%. 90% or 95% of the causes of the failures of these airlines should be found under government policies and other extraneous matters that are beyond the control of these airlines. It's not the fault of the airlines, but the airlines in Nigeria, even politicians sometimes close their eyes to certain salient issues and look for scapegoats in the airlines. I cannot remember how many times Nigerian airlines have been invited to the National Assembly to explain why flights are delayed or canceled. Most times I find it very irritable. It agitates any discerning mind that people try to ask for reasons why these things happen. Number one, poor airport infrastructure. Improving the airport infrastructure in Nigeria will go a long way into solving most of the problems: revenue generation, flight delays, flight cancellations, and the chaotic scenes you have at the airports. I have to say, and everybody knows this, that the infrastructure at the airports are somehow dilapidated. They do not support the way modern aviation is practiced. For example, go to the Abuja airport, which is even a domestic hub for this country, domestic hub. Everybody converge at the Abuja airport, then distribute to other parts of the country. The airlines do not have conveyor belts to move checked-in luggage. You have to employ staff to be carrying luggage on their head to get to the screening point in 21st century Nigeria. Yet airlines are blamed. Has anybody thought of the number of hours it would take an airline to check in one fully loaded 737 with the kind of luggage Nigerian passengers carry? Nobody thinks about that. So your turnaround time of 40 minutes is not even enough. So you put 1 hour, is not even enough. But airlines are blamed for some of these maladies. I'm happy the present MD of FAN, who is, to a large extent, somebody who has been in the system for a long time. So you'll be able to know what I'm talking about. I've had an interface with him, and I have no doubt that this infrastructural deficit is very, very worrisome to his mind, and he's about to do something to change it. But in talking about airport infrastructure, how would FAN develop a world standard airport infrastructure when FAN doesn't have access to the money they generate every day from these airlines? The law says they must remit this to the TSA account of the government. But what does ICAO say in this instance? ICAO makes it known that whatever is generated by airports must be used for the development of airports worldwide. If the government sees FAN as a government revenue generating arm, whereby FAN is starved of necessary funds they're supposed to use for the development of the airports they manage, then there's a problem. This is where legislation comes in. The legislation should change that. The Federal Airports Authority of Nigeria must be allowed to retain its funds to be able to develop the airports to the kind of standard that is appropriate worldwide. Except this is done, the Nigerian airlines will continue to bear the brunt because we are the ones who operate here. I've had so many people blame the airlines of Nigeria for not operating like Sky of Togo, Ethiopian Airlines of this world. How could we do that? How could we do that? Do you have a transit area in Nigerian airports? None. Your international airports do not have transit areas. So why do you blame the poor Nigerian airlines? Their operations are being limited. Their revenues are being shortchanged by such absence. But everybody blames the Nigerian like, oh, they're not strong, they lack capacity, they don't know how to do business. Small Togo, go to the Togo airport. You can converge the world at the Togo airport and distribute worldwide. You go to Addis Ababa, you do the same thing. Republic of Benin, you do the same thing. Ghana, Air Peace flies to Ghana, from Ghana to Monrovia, and to other places. Air Peace flies to Banjul, from Banjul to other places. It cannot fly from Nigeria to any place because there's no transit place for people to wait. We fly to Douala. We have Douala passengers. Instead of using Air Peace to go to Dakar, they use Sky. Why? If we get passengers going to Dakar, when you bring them to the Nigerian airport, where are you going to keep them? They will first of all tell them to pay about $400 for visa. Meanwhile, you're not coming to Nigeria, you're going to Dakar. You take out from the airport, go around, pass immigration, pass customs, pass quarantine, pass even Boy Scouts and Guest Brigade, they're in uniform, all at our airports. When you pass them, you now go all over again to start checking in, to come on board. Nowhere in the world is this done, nowhere, nowhere. So the airport infrastructure in Nigeria and the system itself are very discouraging to having a hub in Nigeria. But look at the geographical position of this country. We're placed to be a fantastic hub, more than Addis Ababa. But the airlines are being blamed for not creating a hub. You cannot create a hub without adequate airport infrastructure. So legislation should come in here, first of all, to make FAN return its funding. This present MD cannot perform magic. The minister cannot perform magic if they don't have the necessary funding to do this. Legislation must come in here to arrest that. Now we talk about inadequate funding of the airlines. Nigerian airlines are always blamed. Nobody has ever remembered that this is a very capital-intensive industry. Capital-intensive and at the same time, not profitable. In other climes where everything works, the highest an airline may achieve is 5% profit at the end of the day. But in Nigeria, where everything is stacked against you, the airline is dead on arrival. And we blame the poor airlines, blame their ownership, blame their governance structure, everything blamable. Even those who have not been able to put the same governance structure in their ministries they run, or in in their own businesses, they blame the airlines. Oh, poor governance structure. Yes, somehow, but I gave it only 5%. High interest loans. The legacy airlines of this world, Delta Airline, Southwest, British Airways, Lufthansa, Virgin, the airlines of this world, even in Africa, Ethiopia, and the rest, they access loans at very low, cheap interest rates, 2%, 3%. The Nigerian airline borrows money at 26%. How do you expect these airlines to compete or succeed? Legislation should come in here because, like the MD said, this is a capital-intensive industry. It must be supported. This is also a catalyst for the development of the economy in other sectors. It's not necessarily to make money for the economy, but to develop other sectors in the country to enhance the ease of flow of tourism into the country and others. Government must invest. And how do they do that? Through legislation. Maybe having a legislation that makes the banks or the central bank to dedicate a certain amount of money to airlines, any airline at a very single-digit interest rate. You need legislation to do this. And at the end of this, I'm going to tell you what we've achieved through legislation to support what I'm saying. Again, apart from high interest loans, how about Forex? Absence of Forex or difficulties in accessing foreign exchange have been a serious bane to the success and development of the airline industry in Nigeria or the aviation industry in Nigeria. Everything about the airline is dollarized. 98% are anything to do with the aircraft and our operations is about foreign exchange. Yet we make our money in Naira. Now the fluctuation of the currency has not helped matters. Even when you have the Naira, you don't see the dollar to buy. Sometimes you have your aircraft packed out there for several months because of lack of foreign exchange. Yet we blame the airlines. Some of the airlines in Nigeria have their money trapped in the Central Bank of Nigeria because of foreign exchange. Yet we blame the airlines. We need legislation here to make it possible to have a window at the central bank or in the banks for certain, just like they did in Egypt and other places, where they reserve certain chunk of Forex for airline operations. Except we do this, we are not serious about coming out of the doldrums. There's also absence of aircraft financing institutions in Nigeria. We don't have any. We don't have any. But I know the present government is trying to tinker with that. And that will be laudable when they do it. It will help. But for now, you don't have aircraft financing institutions in Nigeria. Even the banks do not trust, maybe because of the not so good incidents of the past, where airlines were owing them, but they too should look inwards. When you were charging an airline 26%, how do you want the airline to owe another kind of agreement, plus other things you take from them? So again, another problem Nigerian airlines are having, the unofficial blacklisting by lessors worldwide of Nigerian airlines. Because they said in the past, some airlines leased planes, and when the lessors came to take their plane, the Nigerian airlines went to court to stop them. So dry lease is a very important component of airline operations worldwide. Most of these legacy airlines you see, Emirates, and most of those planes are leased, financed. Nigerian airline, you must gather your money in home, just the same way we buy houses in Nigeria, and go and deposit to buy planes. So how do you expect them to be able to increase capacity? The lessors that are doing this to Nigeria, is the unnecessary stigmatization of this country. Unnecessary. You see, we blame Nigerian Airlines for not obeying the Cape Town Convention, which allows a lessor to take out his or her plane whenever is due to be taken out. But have we bothered to look inwards to find out what these lessors do to the Nigerian Airlines? I know someone who dry leased 2 aircraft from a foreign lessor, a Nigerian airline, to do at least to purchase. So instead of paying maybe $100,000 monthly, he was paying $250,000 monthly, paid into the eventual purchase of those aircraft. 3 months to the end of the lease, the lessor wanted to take out those planes. For what reasons? They were not being owed. They said, oh, the contract you have with Chevron had been terminated. Therefore, we don't believe you will be able to continue paying the remaining 3 months. He provided to them bank guarantee. It is not your business, whatever he's doing with Chevron. Your take should be, has he reneged in his payments? No. But you are saying, you're foreseeing that in future he may not be able to pay. And he threw in a bank guarantee, which you had. Yet they came here with the connivance of Nigerian government officials and took away those planes. How do you protect Nigerian Airlines when this happens? The ordinary wet lease we are doing, you see, is not the way to run aviation. No country depends on wet lease to do it. Wet lease is supposed to be a temporary thing. It's very expensive. Even in this wet lease, if we tell you as airlines of Nigeria what we go through, these lessors are very condescending in the way they treat Nigerians. And if you react appropriately to the way they treat you, next thing we hear, oh, Nigerians are bad. We are stigmatized. Your government will not help you. Your people will talk down on you. We don't love ourselves. That's the truth in this country. Some of them will wake up in the morning, they've not informed you the day before and tell you that they're fatigued. Meanwhile, he didn't fly the previous day. After following all the procedures all over the place, they will tell you they're fatigued, they cannot fly. Sometimes, some of these lessors will give you 4 planes and bring crew for only 2. And you've signed minimum guaranteed hours in a month. When you want to enforce this, you become a bad person. Air Peace has bought an aircraft from an American institution before, paid in full. The following day, asked for that plane to be registered to the Nigerian registry. It went to voicemail. They kept us out. For 9 good months, we couldn't get our aircraft fully paid for. They had taken the aircraft to borrow money somewhere in the United States. A lien was on that aircraft. They took out that lien a day after we paid. If it was a Nigerian that did that, the whole world will hear it. I went to the American embassy. And complained. They told me to maybe you go to court in New York. Oh, that was a trap that I could not afford to take. It took 9 months before I could get my plane. If a Nigerian person had done that, it would be world news. So stigmatization is making it possible for us to be treated the way we are treated. Legislation can come in here to cure some of these ills. And how about insurance? The insurance a Nigerian airline pays on 1 aircraft, quote me, is what the legacy airlines of this world, in the Western world, and even in Asia, would use to insure about 6 aircraft. The vice president of IATA, in the last aviation conference in Abuja, said as much. He said so. He said, and I quote, that I discovered that what a Nigerian airline used in paying for 1 aircraft insurance premium was what he used in Kuwait to pay for about 6 planes. You pay as much as over $2 million, while some airlines are paying $100,000 as premium. They'll tell you Nigeria is unsafe. Those stigmatization to make us cough out money. Nigeria is unsafe. How many times have you had anything unsafe happening here? In other climes, on daily basis, planes fall out of the skies, even in the best of places. But not in Nigeria. Yet, we are meant to bear the brunt of the insurance industry worldwide. Nigerian airlines are the ones paying. Bilateral air services agreement is screwed against Nigerian airlines. Very lopsided. Very, very lopsided. Now, they will tell you that they carry Nigerian airlines along when they are going to do this bazaar. Is a lie. One thing is to inform Nigerian airlines that, oh, the bazaar agreement is going to take place in Kenya or in Norway. When we get there, the Nigerian government officials do not allow you to air your opinion on that table. Meanwhile, airlines from the other countries do. They will tell you you're supposed to be seen, not to be heard, that you're here to observe and tell them later. In one of them, my CEO, Tony Olajide, went to Kenya in one of the bazaars, and the South African representative was looking for the fifth freedom for South African Airways. Nigeria was going to grant it. And the woman asked a question. So when is this fifth freedom going to end? That is to Nigeria, from Nigeria to go to other countries. They said, no, it's there, it's there. The woman, a South African, protected Nigerian Airlines. He said, in that case, I'm not doing. In our country, when you sign it, it's because there's no airline doing it. The moment a South African airline is ready, you have to give it up. So if you say it's ad infinitum, we are not doing it. Is that not a shame? It happened some years ago. Is that not a shame? We are not protected at all. The BASA agreements we have are all lopsided against the country. You have multiple destinations. It's a disservice to this country. This is where legislation will play an important role. We need it. That's why I say that legislative revolution is inevitable in the aviation industry. If this is not done, I can't thank Olisa Agbakoba and his group for bringing this up at this moment in time. We need legislative revolution. It is inevitable. If we are very serious at addressing the maladies in the aviation industry. You talk about multiple destinations. You have some airlines, they have about 6 destinations. They fly to Kano, Port Harcourt, Abuja, Lagos, Kaduna. So I'm sure soon they will start flying to airstrips, foreign airlines. But we're not even more against the destinations given to them than we are against the multiple frequencies given to these airlines that are killers to the Nigerian airline industry. Nigeria is crying about lack of foreign exchange. How do you gain foreign exchange? Aviation is one way you can get foreign exchange, by allowing your airlines to go out there, to become stronger, to go out there, to bring in these billions of dollars. The same way these foreign airlines are cutting away billions of dollars out of Nigeria. The Nigerian investors can do it. They can. You don't need any so-called national carrier to achieve it. They can do it. What is happening is that the airlines are being demonized, are being demeaned, that to the extent that they cannot get up. Those things they ask for the national carrier, give it to the domestic airlines and see what they will do. And I dare the legacy airlines of this world to come to Nigeria to operate under the same conditions, borrow money at 26%, go to an airport where you're giving 2 counters to operate 30 flights, go to get exposed to the myriad of inadequacies we have in this country. And let's see if they will last 72 hours. They will not last 72 hours. So multiple frequencies where a foreign airline is allowed to do city hopping in your country is an abomination. An airline will leave its country, land in Abuja, drop passengers in Abuja, take off from Abuja, and go to Port Harcourt, drop passengers in Port Harcourt, and pick passengers from Port Harcourt and come back to Abuja again before flying back to his country. Tell me where you are now leaving the domestic operators. What is left for them? And when you ask members of government, they will tell you, but Nigeria passengers must enjoy is what they want. No, they want ease of travel. You see, we are not looking at what harm this is bringing to your reserves as a nation. No country allows that. The foreign countries, they don't allow. America with its might in aviation, America with its might in economy, does not allow you to do that in America. In America, even ordinary private jets, if you take off from here, New York is nearer Nigeria. Maybe you're going to Atlanta. You must, because of the what do you call it? The aircraft might not be able to go to Atlanta direct, so you stop over in New York. You refuel. You're allowed to take off again to Atlanta. Once you land Atlanta, ordinary private jet, you're not supposed to fly that plane to anywhere in the US again. You'll be forced to use American Airlines in order to contribute to their already blossoming economy. Not to think of commercial airline. In commercial airline, it's a no-no. It's a no-no. You don't do city hopping. And we don't mind if you give them 10 airports in Nigeria, but let them fly directly from their country to those airports and go back to their countries, direct from that airport. If Qatar wants to fly to Abuja, fine, go to Abuja, go back from Abuja to your country. If they want to fly to Ibadan, let them go to Ibadan, but go direct from Ibadan to your country. If it is profitable for them, let them do it. But the situation where Nigerian government officials allow multiple frequencies, you're killing your airlines in this country. And you blame the airlines at the end of the day. And if you say that's what Nigeria, can the airlines satisfy them? The airlines will satisfy them. The airlines are the ones moving this country. They will satisfy them, make them strong. Those countries didn't make their airlines strong overnight. They created structures and platforms and systems that made their airlines to thrive. You don't start by hitting the airline, hammering on the airlines, and you expect them to succeed, when inadvertently you are the one causing them to fail. And when you say that's what Nigerian passengers want, everybody wants international airport to be, we're not against that. Let them fly directly there and go back to their country from there. And if you say that is what is needed, I'm sorry to say this, the Southeasterners are mostly businessmen. Most importers from this country come from the Southeast. They would like to import water. They would like to import toothpick. Allow them to start importing water and toothpick because they would like to do that. So let us be straightforward in this. Being given to airlines, foreign airlines in this country. And except that is done, we continue changing our own economy.
Mr. Nyema,
yeah.
You have about 3 more minutes. So sorry for interrupting, but you're making some very valid points. But I'm just trying to draw your attention.
The idea of this is, if you want to get it correct, we must listen to the truth. The truth is very. So another one is preferential treatment of foreign airlines by the government and people of Nigeria. You see, I was worried when everybody was celebrating dear president's visit to the UAE. Nobody was talking about the Nigerian airline. Nobody. Nigerians were not talking. The government must have talked to them about the Nigerian airline. No doubt about that, because our minister, Professor Kayama, was there. He must have chipped in a word or two for Nigerian airlines. Well, you notice that the Nigerian populace and politicians, they are celebrating, oh, Emirates will start coming. They're owing them. Yes, I support government to pay foreign airlines whatever we are owing them. They're not even owing them. It's just that their money is in their banks in Nigeria. They've not been able to get dollar to transfer their monies back to their country. That's the only problem. But nobody is trying to address the issues of the Nigerian airlines too. The Nigerian airlines have their own funds trapped in the central bank of Nigeria, just like the foreign airlines. But we are not talking about the Nigerian airlines. Everybody is saying pay the foreign airlines their money. Nobody is saying pay Nigerian airlines their money. FX has $14 million trapped at the central bank for the past 5 months. No dollar, no naira back. Nobody is talking about that. It's vexatious. Nobody is talking about that. The foreign airlines must be protected at the expense. Nobody cares about the people who are providing the jobs. And let me warn you, all the foreign airlines in Nigeria put together, all their staff put together, all of them, is not even up to 100. And over 30 of them flying into this country. What they do is they use NACO and SACOL. Everybody uses them. There's no Nigerian airline that does not have at least 1,000 staff. Some of us have 7,000. We are moving the economy. Yet, our rifle plates is not recognized at all. So, while you are giving monies to the foreign airlines, remember that the Nigerian airlines also have their monies trapped through bidding with the central bank for several months. The naira they don't have anymore is with their positions have been debited, and their dollar they don't have. They don't have. And we are talking about only foreign airlines because every Nigerian wants to say, oh, I flew Emirates, I flew Etihad, I flew British Airways. Nobody. And as long as we continue doing this as a nation, we cannot get anywhere. How about maintenance? There's no known viable maintenance business in Nigeria. This is where we should focus. The airlines of Nigeria expend billions outside this country trying to maintain their plane. And at the advent of COVID, it exposed a lot of flaws. At the end of COVID, most airlines of the world started using their MROs. Nigerian airlines were shut out. You have your planes packed, looking for slots for several months, no slot to even maintain your plane, even with your money. So we need, as a matter of urgency, to have MROs here. But how would you have MRO when you seek land at the airport to develop a hangar for you to build an MRO 10 years down the line, you've not gotten the land, even after you have paid? The ease of doing business must be addressed. The ease of doing business in Nigeria is zero. It's zero. And this discourages foreign and local investors also. The economy suffers. There's entrenched bureaucratic bottlenecks in the system. Can only be undone through legislation. Some of the factors that mitigate against the ease of doing business in Nigeria could be traced to even laws that discourage business growth. A situation where you pay 5% of your ticket fares to NCA is hurting us. Even FAN, if they want to give you land at the airport to set up a hangar, you're going to commit in writing that you'll be paying 7% of your gross earnings, not your profit, gross earnings to FAN, even after paying FAN for the land, which are not even selling to you, they are leasing it to you. Yet, whatever you make, you're supposed to pay 7%. These are legislations that should be expunged from our status with immediate effect if we want to move forward. So, gentlemen, I don't have enough time, as I said, to talk. I have so many things to share with all of you, but let me say this. Legislative revolution is inevitable. We have succeeded in using legislation to change some of these narratives. 2 years ago, 2020, former President Muhammad Buhari signed into law custom duty waivers on aircraft purchase and aircraft spares. Signed into law VAT waiver from aircraft purchase and aircraft spares purchase. Signed into law VAT waiver from airline ticket fares. We in AON took this fight to the legislature. We fought it at the National Assembly. We got both houses of the National Assembly to pass the bill because that was killing airlines. They were killing airlines. Those taxes were killing airlines in the country. And the former minister, Hadisirika, helped us. In fact, I was the person doing the presentation at the National Assembly. And I have to say it the way it is. I have to be honest. The former minister sat by my side and was giving me information that were very vital. He helped me to make that presentation at the National Assembly. He sat by my side doing that. And I give him that honor and glory for the things he did towards that particular getting that legislation, piece of legislation passed by National Assembly. And we took it to the president, and the president didn't waste a second in signing them into law. That has, in fact, kept Nigerian airlines flying today. You can imagine before, we used to pay FRS every month, they would come knocking on your door. So 7.5% VAT on your ticket fares. So whatever the airlines are going to get has already been creamed off. Custom duties running 2 million. We wouldn't have been able to be importing brand new planes that we are doing now. No airline would have been able to do that. So I thank President Buhari and the minister for seeing it happen. And I know that this particular regime is business growth driven, no doubt about that. And I'm sure they are going to do just that. Ladies and gentlemen, I have a lot to talk, but let me just leave it there. But remember that there's no transit hub in Nigeria, no place for transit to distribute passengers in Nigeria. These things will come to play when and only when there's a law making it possible for FAN to retain most of its revenue, most, if not all, of its revenue for the development of the airports. Legislative revolution is inevitable. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Barrister Onyema. You've raised a lot of important issues that will shape the panel session for today's conversation. I'm so grateful for all the points you raised: insurance, financing. You know, there's so many issues that you pointed out. I'm very grateful for your contributions. We're still expecting the Minister of Aviation. We're also expecting the representative of the DG for NCAA. They assured us that they will be here, so we think they should be here very soon. But while we wait for them, we'll go to the panel session. I will just briefly provide a format for the panel session. The format for the panel session will be as follows. Each panelist will speak on the theme for the webinar, which is repositioning the aviation sector. For revenue and growth, the role of legislation. They will address it from different perspectives. Air Commodore Ademola will need to address the topic from the perspective of stakeholders. Ms. Cindy Foster will address the topic from the perspective of an investment specialist. Mr. Olumide Okunayo will address the topic from the consumer's perspective, and Dr. Alex Muba will address the topic from an operator's perspective. After which we will proceed to a question and answer session. And just like the administrator has indicated in the comment section, if you have any questions during the presentations, please don't hesitate to leave them in the comment section. I can also kindly indicate who the question is directed to, and I will make sure it gets addressed during the Q&A session. Okay, I've just been told that the representative of the DG of NCCA is here, Mr. Abubakiru Saru. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing the name very well. If you're here, we'll grant you. Okay, we're trying to give you access to video and audio. Okay. I think we've added him. Mr. Abubakiru, if you can now speak if you. Can you hear us? It's as if you're muted. Can you please unmute, Mr. Abubakiru? Okay. You're welcome, sir. You can go ahead.
Yes, good afternoon. Okay, the organizers. My name is Abubakar Saruku. I'm representing the DGNCA Captain Musa Nu, who is out of the country presently for a national assignment. And they asked me to make his own presentation on this topic, repositioning the aviation sector for revenue generation and growth, role of legislation. I've listened, especially I came in when Chairman Airpeace was making his own presentation. It was rich, and then it covered so many areas, which I don't want to repeat again. There are some issues, vital issues that you raise, which I believe this forum has come at the right time to address those issues. And the stakeholders too, we should look at the big picture the legislation plays in the growth, development, and revenue generation of aviation sector. I want to start by saying we have adequate legislation in place, so to say, but those the stakeholders, especially the carrier, we should try as much as possible to look at the holistic of all these legislations, so that we don't concentrate on the so-called favorable area or the most concerned area and leave others that if they are properly managed, they will facilitate the development and growth we desire. For instance, the buzzer issue, the multiple designation, and multiple entry points. It has brought a lot of advantages to the Nigerian carriers too, because if we were still operating the former regulated regime, whereby Nigerian government can only designate one carrier on a route. And today, we have like 2 domestic carriers. Airpeace happen to be the largest, not only in Nigeria, but in entire West Africa. If we are limiting them, if not because of legislation and this multiple designation, we have like 5 designated airlines on most of the African routes today, even though they are yet to maximize or optimize the benefit therein. There is one particular area that I want to bring out, which Nigerian carriers up till now are yet to see those areas as areas of where they can tap for development growth, then become competitive like other carriers, either within the sub-region, at the continental level, or intercontinental level. Under the same BASA, yes, the right is reciprocal, is based on reciprocity, but you cannot hold on or stop the contracting party that is ready, capable, and able to explore those opportunities. But we think they are more or less like an interim provision, which is code share. I remember early 1990, Bellevue Airline and Aero Contractor, they had a code share arrangement with KLM and Air France. Because that time, all these European carriers were under the regulated regime. They can only come to Lagos and go back to their country. At that time, the capacity is defined, is limited. Even the type of equipment is specified. Most of their traffic, or substantial part of their traffic, are meant to go to Port Harcourt. The Bellevue and Aero Contractor were evaluated, and they measure up to the minimum standard required, and they synchronize their schedules to meet up with those two foreign carriers. The most important thing there that I want to make, this sector, Lagos, Port Harcourt, and Port Harcourt, Lagos, these foreign carriers, the Nigerian carriers are being paid in dollars. That time is $10. That was around 1992, 3, 4. The same provision still remains in the BASA. But the government cannot force that on the foreign carriers, but our carrier must position themselves. I have this schedule, which are verifiable. The level of regularities, the service is compatible with their MFJ partners. I think this is key. This issue of co-termination that Chairman Airpeace was mentioning would not have been there. When we liberalize this code share issue, the third party code share, the Nigerian government made this as a policy that, first of all, you must code share with local airline. Unless they refuse or you don't find them qualified before you can code share with third party. I think this area, the legislation is there. Let us sit down and see ourselves as Nigerians that must promote the Nigerian business, especially in this sector, and make ourselves, our country, the economic growth, and then let the aviation industry develop. And by that development, the returns will be better for the betterment of our country in terms of economic growth. I think it's the same legislation. I want to employ like this Olisa Agbakoba Forum to organize other fora apart from this, where we have that interface and a robust discussion, review and understanding of all these bazaars and then the legislation that's already in existing, and work together, then it can be a win-win, either for the government, the technocrats, and then the airline, who are the primary stakeholders or the frontline beneficiary of the agreement, because that agreement is useless if it doesn't bring any benefit. As a matter of fact, the BASA is meant for the development of the national or the contracting party, first and foremost. So I don't think anybody in his right senses will just be a sign BASA just for science sake. That is one area that I think we have legislation, as he said earlier on, we can still look at it and say, let us put A, B, C, so as to make this one a total package in this area. The same thing with SATI. In 2014, we held a bilateral air service agreement with Togo, Lomé, for 3 days in Abuja. And after when we are rounding up, we asked the Togo people, name your carrier. We are negotiating, but the High Commissioner here told us that we are looking up to Nigeria. We don't have any carrier. We don't have capacity to set up a carrier. I remember then, the largest carrier in Nigeria then, its representatives were in that meeting. But they said, the remark, after we told them, persuaded them, was that who among you here can acquire that aircraft and you just deploy it to Togo? What was in Togo? That agreement was signed without Togo indicating any carrier from their own end. Nigeria had 2 airlines already designated. Few months, Ethiopian came and they were asking what was the position of Nigeria on Yamoussoukro decision, especially the Article 5, where a national within the African countries can establish a carrier in another African countries and be recognized as the national designating carrier of that country without any discrimination. We said yes. That was the position of Nigeria, not knowing that it is this ASCAI that they were talking about. They came up with the formula. Even the name ASCAI was meant to be a regional carrier. It was conceived here in Nigeria. But we kept all the documents on the shelf, and then the Togo and the Ethiopian, they explore it. And today, ASCAI is everywhere. That is one area that we shouldn't look at immediate. What is immediate? What is immediate? Or seeing ourselves or looking back in those days when the government will just dictate Nigeria Airways has to go to ABC, and then the aircraft from the other country cannot come and compete with Nigeria Airways. So the day has gone. This is a business era. And I believe with the crop of the people we have now within the aviation agencies, they are ready to cooperate with our carriers, and then they are ready to promote any robust legislation that will make the industry growth. I think he has there on the infrastructure development. There is no two way to reach without having the appropriate infrastructure. We are yet to commence the process and procedures of generating revenue and growth this aviation, Nigeria aviation business. I will not delve much on that. Modernization of regulation. I think we have to give kudos to the immediate past government, even though all those legislation are not perfect, but it has enhanced as creating more favorable environment and tax, provided all of us should come together, understand those legislation, and then find a favorable ways of applying them to our existing challenges and the future one, and make amendments for the future development. This one, I think in this area, we still need more legislation, especially on maintenance infrastructure is a key. Not that we don't have investors that are interested. They know that the market is here for them. But there are other things that are not investment friendly, which is beyond the aviation sector. Legislation has to come in here. I will look the wider picture, and then we can come out like other clients, not just be treating flying from one point to the other or collaborating with one carrier or the other, but the wider economic spectrum. So we need such legislation. That is one area. Then I agree with taxation charges and fees policies. We need strong legislation here, whereby the agencies and other taxes that relating to aviation is critically look and streamline and make it more reasonable, that will not impede the growth and development of the industry. Another area that we need discussion is workforce development. We need to support promoting the aviation education so that the training and then acquiring expertise will be more easier, less costly than sending every staff that you want to train overseas. is a capital flight, and it has a negative consequences to the development of the airlines and their growth, and impact negatively on the national economy. Research and development. That is one area that we are lacking behind. If we compare ourselves, compare notes with what is happening, even within the African continents, we need attention here so that those who are interested, people can see this area that is area of engagement that whose products will benefit the industry and add value to what we are doing presently, and in the short run, increase or accelerate the growth in the industry. I think one area that we still need legislation, even though we have now, is consumer protection. At least presently, Part 19 of the Nigerian civil aviation regulations is solely linked for the consumer protection. There are provisions there that are yet to be given effect to because of the unfavorable environment. We need to look into this legislative-wise so that more people will continue to fly, and then encouraging others to fly so that the market share will continue to increase, and more returns to the operator, more revenue to the service providers. In conclusion, repositioning the Nigerian aviation sector for revenue generation and growth requires a comprehensive legislative framework that prioritizes safety, sustainability, infrastructural development, and industry competitiveness. By enacting policies that create a conducive environment for the aviation industry, Nigeria can enhance its economic contribution and strengthening the position in the global aviation market. The Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority, we are ready and eager to partner with Olisa Agbakoba and others, the legislative issue, aiming at promoting, developing, and generating more revenue in the aviation sector. This is the presentation of the DGCAA, whom I represented. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for your presentation. And on behalf of Olisa Agbakoba Legal, I want to also say that we're eager to work with NCAA to ensure that we strengthen the existing legal framework for the aviation sector in Nigeria. I'm particularly interested in the point you made about the need for us to audit the existing bilateral service agreements that we have to ensure that they protect our indigenous airlines. So we look forward to working with you going forward. Thank you so much, sir, for your presentation, for participating in this webinar. We'll now go back to the panel session. Like I stated earlier, the format will have presentation from each of the panelists, a 10 minutes presentation from each of the panelists. They will look at the topic or the theme for today's webinar from different perspectives, after which I will now have a question and answer session. So I would begin the panel session by introducing the first speaker, who is Air Commodore Ademola Onitiju. I hope I pronounced it well. If I didn't, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. He's the president, Aviation Safety Roundtable Initiative. Air Commodore Onitiju is the president, Aviation Roundtable. He's a legal practitioner and a commissioned regular combatant officer in the Nigerian Air Force. He has attended several courses and programs, including the Senior Staff Course 22 at the Armed Forces Command and Staff College, the Senior Executive Course 33 of the National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies, and the Prosecution and Defense Academy program of the Northwestern University of Chicago, United States. He has also attended international conferences, seminars on international air law, aircraft acquisition and insurance, and is a member of the Aviation Law and Legal Practice Committee of the International Bar Association. Air Commodore Onitiju is a recipient of several honors and awards, including the Distinguished Service Star, Meritorious Service Staff, and the Golden Jubilee Award. Air Commodore, you can now make your presentation. Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, I can. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me stand on the established protocol. I must start by commending the efforts of Olisa Agbakoba Legal legal firm. And I must commend the last two speakers, whose submissions were very comprehensive in relevance to the topic for which we are here. I was particularly impressed by Chief Allen Oyema's submissions. We're not too surprised. He wears the shoes. He knows where it pinches. He touched on several aspects which requires further attention. For us at the Aviation Safety Roundtable Initiative, we are much concerned about the need to observe the best global practice in aviation. It's a non-governmental organization made up of professionals who are particularly concerned with safety, quality, and professionalism. We see aviation as a collaborative teamwork, and the presence of major stakeholders at this session bears testimony to this fact. Today's gathering is a desirable partnership which accords with the Aviation Roundtable's objective for the advancement of Nigerian aviation sector through a consistent working relationship with the government and knowledge sharing with stakeholders. No doubt, the aviation sector has the potential to become a major revenue generator for any country if proper legislation is put in place. With the growth of the global economy, there is an ever-increasing demand for air transportation, making it more important than ever to focus on the repositioning of the aviation sector for efficiency, competitiveness, and consumer satisfaction. More than revenue generation. The creation of an enabling environment by the political leadership will usher in growth and an increase in aviation sector's contribution to the national income. That's our belief. Of equal importance is the sanctity of the content of air services agreements and the need to cultivate a culture of respect for contractual provisions in dealing with local and international investors in the aviation sector. The gentleman that represented the NCA Director General laid a lot of emphasis on this, and I subscribe to that view. To this end, for us in the ART, we still renew the call for the Nigerian leadership to further expedite action where they say something is being done on the release of the accumulated domestic and foreign airlines trapped funds, as it has dented Nigeria's image as an investment-friendly nation. In one of the sessions we had, we felt that if we could have our credit forward by using crude oil to settle immediate obligations, these ones too, that has a way of laundering our image, could be given consideration. We expect the political leadership to consider that approach so that a huge burden can be lifted off the necks of domestic and international airlines who are so afflicted. Now, to the role of legislation in the repositioning of the aviation sector, it can be overflogged. It is essential, and there is the urgency of now, just like the way Chief Allen Oyema put it. It is essential for government to create a legal framework that enables airlines to operate legally and safely, while also promoting competition and growth in the industry. Legislation can help to lower the cost of air travel, increase passenger safety, and improve efficiency in the aviation sector. As you may have heard, Nigeria is not short of legislation for regulating the aviation sector and promote its growth. But the prevailing socioeconomic factors dictates that those laws be streamlined to meet today's challenges without lowering standards or global best practices. At ART, we see law as a veritable instrument for social engineering. Profound legislation could help convey the best of policy directions aimed at the attainment of the common good. Now, we identified some key areas for legislative focus. These include safety regulations, which, of course, Nigerian government accorded priority to that. That is the provision of safety regulations that ensure the highest standards of safety for passengers and aircrew alike. There is also the reinvigorated Safety Investigation Bureau, whose jurisdiction traverses multimodal transportation platforms. This complements the safety regulations monitored and enforced by the NCA through its safety prescriptions and recommendations for the prevention of accidents or its occurrence. There is also those that cover competition. And for us, we felt government should promote competition in the aviation sector by encouraging the entry of new airlines into the market and ensuring that existing airlines operate fairly. The adoption of most of ART's recommendations will help create the required environment for a level playing field. They're talking of prohibitive charges. We felt that taxation policies should, although established now, should be in such a way that encourages airlines to operate in the country while ensuring that revenue is generated for the government. But then, taxes and tariffs, we should exercise some caution. So for us, Policy directives could be initiated to suspend prohibitive tariffs and other charges that hamper growth of the sector. And this one is momentary. You may recall when Chief Allen Oyema was making his presentation, he alluded to the remarks by a foreign participant at the recent seminar. If indeed we are repositioning aviation for growth and development or generation of goods, you should allow operators in the industry to thrive. And the policy direction could cause a suspension of such identified charges and tariffs. On infrastructure, the last two speakers too, they mentioned the submissions. And for us, we are in agreement that investment should be made in airport infrastructure to meet the growing demand for air travel. Chief Oyema copiously elaborated what inadequate infrastructure causes in terms of impediment to better business environment. And for us, we want to be realistic. We're not unaware of what is going on in the Nigerian scene. We felt that due to the paucity of funds currently being experienced by the Nigerian political leadership, we felt that the adoption of a suitable models of public-private partnership models will help deliver the needed rapid aviation infrastructure. Somebody mentioned the need for adoption of, I think it was the representative of MDFA. Yes, PPP is good. It's just a question of identifying the appropriate model. But presumably, you must have led by making the environment conducive, investment-friendly environment. Then environmental regulations too, we felt that the government should establish regulations that promote environmental sustainability in the aviation sector, such as reducing carbon emissions and promoting the use of alternative fuel. The future is already here with us. Great scientific strides are being attained daily, globally, and researchers and other clients are exploring the possibility of flying electric planes and other energy sources to reduce the devastating effect of global warming and other catastrophic effects of climate change. And Nigeria should not be left behind. Legislation should be made to encourage or bring into being the requisite institutions to address this. On consumer protection, yes, we are aware, like the gentleman that represented the SCA Director General submitted, he noted, of course, Part 19 of the Civil Aviation Regulations, which address the issue of consumer protection. And part of what it was meant to address were the unfair practices by airlines, such as hidden fees, flight cancellation, lost baggage, denied boarding, and overbooking. The CAA's Department of Consumer Protection could be further re-energized to make more impact on the traveling public. As for international cooperation, that we cannot run away from. Aviation is international business, and we should, in conjunction with the other governments, establish international standards and regulations for the aviation industry. Most of the conventions are already domesticated. All we just need to do is to continue to live up to the best practices that they contain. And prescription for its practice has updated many standard and recommended practices, which have been endorsed by the Global Aviation Regulating Body, the ICAO, and the Civil Aviation Act, together with its regulations, empowers the Civil Aviation Authority as a regulatory body on aviation to regulate aviation safety, carry out oversight functions of airports, airspace meteorological services, including economic regulations. Then innovation. We don't have to get left behind. The requisite legislation could be made to encourage innovation in the aviation industry so that development of new technologies will not catch us napping. We should be in their midst. We should tarry along with what every other person is doing. So in conclusion, we felt that the repositioning of the aviation sector for revenue generation and growth using the legislation is essential. Government should prioritize the establishment of a legal framework that promotes safety, competition, and growth in the sector, and ultimately leading to the creation of a thriving and prosperous aviation industry. Advice to the government is for the creation of the right atmosphere for operators to thrive, and the resultant prosperity will be an additional source of revenue generation for the government. So for us, let the government do the needful, and the benefits will triple. But as a further aside, I noted some submission by the chairman of APIS when I identified the deficit in terms of financial institutions for financing aviation in the country. ART had once advocated the need for, if you cannot give us a preferential exchange rate, and he cited the example of a country in Africa, Egypt, that purposefully created a discriminatory fee to allow it thrive. Most countries in the world do that now. Even the Middle East countries that has the wherewithal to finance aviation all around. It is towards an end, and the end is betterment of their societies, promote tourism, promote economic activities in their various nations. If you are talking of national carriers today, I think those are about the only set of people who, to a large extent, are funding the carriers. But whether flag carrier or national carrier, the bottom line is its impact on your economy and the observance of global best practices. So we still want to use this platform to encourage the government to look into the possibility of such preferential rates. And again, the regulatory aspects, where we concede and we are aware that the act establishing the NCAA was reinvigorated early last year. We partook in its review as a body. But you need to address the issue of human capacity development in NCAA and other aviation agencies. We have had instances when very good hands got retired, not because they were incompetent or whatever, but because of the mandatory statutory age of retirement. We had advocated that such set of people will be re-engaged to pass on the experience to younger ones who could equally be recruited. You cannot buy experience in the market. So we suggested that such persons be re-engaged on contract so that the investment the nation has had in such people is not lost. I think we want to stop there. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much, sir, for your presentation. I will now call on the next panelist, Cindy Foster, to make her presentation. I'll do a brief introduction of Cindy Foster. She is the Principal Managing Partner, Aero Capital Partners. Cindy is a strategically focused serial entrepreneur with a passion of Africa and aviation in particular. An economics graduate from Sussex University with a keen interest in finance. Cindy launched Avero Capital partners with an international team of aviation business and finance experts to help aviation companies in Africa, the Caribbean, and South America, and also attract investment. She's a member of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, Aviation Thematic Group, and is the founder member of the Aviation Consultancy of the Year, Innovation and Excellence Award 2023. He also won an award for being the best regional aviation and aerospace project support organization 2023. And the list goes on and on. She's also the founder of Nylon Marketing, a strategically focused marketing reputation management agency with offices in Lagos and London. She has over 20 years experience as a marketing and PR specialist with an international client base across multiple industrial and business sectors, including aviation. She has been consulting businesses in Nigeria since 2011. And although not a Nigerian by descent, she moved to Nigeria in 2018. Cindy, you can make your presentation now.
Thank you very much. Okay. Hope you can see my screen.
Yeah, we can.
Okay, good. So whilst this webinar has primarily been focused on revenue generation and growth, the objective should always be profit, supported by value creation and growth. Oh, looks like this is not moving. Hang on, there's a problem. It doesn't seem to be moving. Oh. Anyway, I'll just carry on. So when we talk about aviation, really, we shouldn't be focused on revenue generation. The objective is profit, and profit which generates returns which exceed the cost of capital. So we've heard about the high costs of capital for Nigeria in particular, but given the asset size of aviation, it's typically a high cost anyway. But a handful of airlines around the world have provided a solution which exceeds the cost of their capital, e.g. Ryanair and Air Asia. The industry as a whole has not been capable of sustaining profitability throughout an entire economic cycle. We've had the impact of the COVID pandemic, but prior to that, I think 2019 was one of the best years of aviation globally, and the world hasn't yet got back to those levels at all. When we talk about value creation, we're talking about the ability of an airline to create a product which satisfies consumers' needs and wants. So that could be any type of business model, provided it ticks the box from the consumer perspective. And because when you are dealing with an airline business particularly, you can't just do what you want. You really have to have a focus on customers, and any airline which has a focus on what customers' needs and wants are, regardless of whether they are at the top of the market or the bottom of the market, they are targeting what their customer needs and wants, and because of that will create something which is recognizable by a customer. When we talk about growth, we need to decide, what are we talking about in terms of growth? Is it just revenue growth? Is it new routes or additional frequencies, more staff, or is it strictly profit? What's going on with this thing? Let me try again. Okay, one thing which is not debatable in aviation is change is the only constant. The aviation industry globally is in a constant state of flux, with new technologies, routes, operating procedures, and regulations being introduced all the time. One of the most significant impacts of regulatory change is on safety. Obviously, safety is of paramount importance in aviation, so any changes to regulations or legislations that affect safety need to be taken seriously and prioritized. As new technologies are introduced or improvements are made, aviation agencies need to amend existing regulations to take account of these changes. This could include anything from the new rules on aircraft maintenance to changes in the way aircraft control is conducted, or ensuring that aviation businesses are compliant with these changes. That can be a challenge, but it's vital to maintain high standards. New regulations can often require businesses to make significant investments to stay compliant. For example, upgrading equipment, adding aircraft, or training staff to meet new standards. That can be very expensive. This can put pressure on margins, affect profitability, and make attracting investment more difficult. So it's important to consider the cost implications of any regulatory changes before making decisions and implementation. There are specific growth drivers for aviation businesses around the world, and people utilize different elements in order to get an advantage within the aviation sector that they operate within. Typically, when people are going into the aviation sector, they will use market insights so that they can recognize opportunities in unserved, underserved, or overpriced markets, or niche market segments. They will also seek to use technological advantages. So technological developments are important. And we've seen this most recently with using the internet to bypass traditional distribution channels, which has helped airlines lower the cost without having agents, to pay along the way. They've taken control of some part of their revenue at least. There's also been an emerging approach to enterprise management. So using simplified organizational structures and internal processes have been important in driving growth in aviation. Also seizing opportunities, commercial opportunities arising from liberalization or deregulation of a growing number of air transport markets. We've seen that Africa has been trying to do that for a number of years. And we still are nowhere near where we need to be with SATAM. Poor implementation and poor will seems to be the determining factor of the limitations on the growth of the market across Africa and also within African countries. And there are a number of things which affect that, but given the limited time, I'm not going to go into detail. But one of the most important growth drivers is value creation. And that is a decent sized network, a decent brand, good motivated staff, and the right size fleet, the right fleet for your environment as well is very important. And when it comes to growth drivers, your competitive strategy is going to have a huge impact. A lot of what I see in Nigeria particularly is a lot of same as opportunities. There's hardly a competitive strategy between most of the airlines. You can't use price as a strategy. You need to have something a bit more substantial than that. Then the other thing that we need to have differentiation of is business model. Revenue models, whether geographic or service scope, wide market or niche market. Who are you going to be getting your revenues from, and how will those revenues be generated? A lot of airlines around the world have got multiple revenue sources, whether it be cargo, diversified portfolio businesses. It could be anything from training, MRO, hotels, engineering, all sorts of things. Airlines have realized that just selling tickets, bums on seats, isn't enough, particularly in high cost environments, to make your business model attractive. And so businesses have diversified into consulting, leasing, hotels, and of course, ancillary revenue is an important part of business models around the world, but not so much in Africa as yet. Then we've got different drivers, which to those business models which will impact. And then your cost model, which is the bigger part in area, how much it will cost to earn revenue. And obviously your input and operating costs and your productivity is going to drive your cost model. And you've got specific limitations, which I will speak on a bit later on, which impact your cost model. Implementation activity, actions taken daily at the operating level, routes, schedules, frequencies, aircraft choice, leasing, purchasing decisions. All of these things have an impact on whether your operation to be successful. And I'm focusing on airlines because for me, airlines are source of the business in aviation, which area they are off sideline and decisions are made which don't include them, and the impact of them are not addressed. So regulatory, legislative activity impact the ability of airline generate revenue and profit, and that's why it is important. As we mentioned it in a while, there needs to be a real reason why you are updating and which direction you are going in, because the growth of the industry isn't going to be there unless there's growth coming from the airlines. Ground handlers can't sit at the airport doing nothing. You know, airports are just warehouses without airlines. And so we must bring back the focus on airline growth drivers and the impact on legislation and regulation on those. And so I want to go back to basics so that we all understand. Now, your operating environment, political, economic, social, and technological, these things always appear on business plans. But do people really pay attention to how these things impact? One of the reasons why Nigeria has a negative investment, unless you are given a leg up, as we have seen in some of the foreign entrants who looked at the operating environment and decided that this doesn't suit their business model, they can't work with this, so therefore they want to change the operating environment to suit them. Well, that's not fair. That's not fair competition. That doesn't take into account that the domestic airlines have been operating within this very difficult and often toxic operating environment. And so it's an important aspect of a driver of investment. And so legislation needs to look at how it can make those things work better from the perspective of investment. Market access is another one. Now, different countries around the world have got different policies with regards to market access. Liberalization is one of the drivers of investment in aviation, because we've seen it when the US liberalized their airspace. It brought in lots of new airlines. The legacy carriers couldn't cope with the increased competition and some bad luck along the way. But it did definitely help grow the US market into the largest aviation market in the world, even to date. And the impact on market access in the single European aviation market has been a phenomenal success. And post-Brexit, UK is feeling the impact of lack of market access. So market access definitely is something that, from a legislative perspective, we need to make sure we are creating the right environment for growth of the market, not just in Nigeria for Nigerian airlines, but across the continent for Nigerian airlines as well. And certain things need to be done to ensure market access. One of the other drivers of investment is risk. Country risk, industry risk, business risk. And we all know that pretty much for all of those metrics, Nigeria is high risk. And there are things which can be done to lower the risk, but Nigeria's not doing it. Going on, whether it's to do with law, contract enforcement, whether it is to do with forex stability, whether it's to do with the trapped funds, whether it's to do with political risk linked to the country. But obviously, aviation is a global industry, and as such, it has a high industry risk around the world. So it's not just in Nigeria that aviation is a high risk industry. It's capital intensive and the benefits are not often seen for the long term. And so you've got to be, cash rich to be able to sustain the lows and work towards the highs for a long time in aviation. So that attracts a lot of risk. And the business risk. When you do business in a lot of countries, you've got certain data on the business, on the directors, on their track record in terms of credit, etc. But we don't have access to a lot of that in Nigeria. So that poses an element of business risk. Also, we have a propensity in Nigeria of airline businesses being run by people who are not from the airline industry and who don't necessarily hire professionals or listen to professionals. And so when people look at the team and they see that all the team are perhaps experienced in Nigeria, which has got, a challenged history in aviation, yet they haven't found outside people who've worked in aviation markets that have been successful around the world, it can act as a negative. And that risk metric is something that wherever I go in the world and I try to talk about Nigerian aviation, if people aren't walking away, they're telling me their negative stories of what happened to them, whether they're a leasing company who couldn't recover their aircraft, or whether they were somebody who tried to do some deal and it didn't go to plan, or the bribery risk, because if you are a foreign person coming from the UK, US particularly, the climate of way business is done in Nigeria in terms of if you want a project to be passed, you need to hand over money first, grease somebody's palm before business can be done, doesn't work with a lot of professionals. And we saw that when Boeing had the interest in creating an MRO in Nigeria, they fell upon that same sorry tale, and in the end decided that they couldn't work in this environment, and so to set up their partnership with Ghana instead. And we've seen that and heard that over and over again. Another driver of investment is confidence. It's very difficult to have confidence in the Nigerian aviation market. Even from the outside, you hear so many stories, which not all are true. And a lot of things are deliberately told in a negative, just to score points, just because of tribal issues, just because of relationships, or just because somebody wants to make a name for themselves so that someone can silence them with some money. So we've all seen that happen in the industry. It doesn't lead to increasing when you are talking about a high-risk country, industry, and potential business. Somebody needs to mute their...
You have joined, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, you joined.
Another driver of investment is corporate governance. So corporate governance structure and ownership models have an impact. And we often hear in Nigeria this thing about one-man band airlines, and is quite a damaging thing to be putting out there. Again, it affects confidence. It puts a certain spin on the airline businesses in Nigeria that there are no boards. We saw with the agencies in the previous administration that they had no boards. The boards were not inaugurated, which led to one-man band decision-making, a lot of which was not positive for the industry, and a lot which was negative for the industry. So corporate governance is very important in terms of having those voices that is going to give you, another perspective. And also it helps when it comes to ownership models. We haven't seen an IPO in aviation since MedView. And I don't know when we're going to see the next IPO in aviation, because we're not really working towards those exit models because of the ownership structures that we've got. So we need to look at that, and legislation needs to find ways of ensuring we have good corporate governance with regards to structure and ownership as well. Another driver for investment, market size, GDP per capita. By market size, I do not, and I absolutely do not mean population. Your population is not the market size for aviation. And anybody who knows anything about addressable markets, target audiences, and disposable income will know that market size is not the driver for your industry. It's not the driver of aviation industries ever, but GDP per capita is. So ensuring that your legislation, which doesn't just mean Nigerian aviation legislation, but everything which impacts market size and GDP, is working towards growing that middle class, that upper middle class, that traveling public. Without a growth in disposable income and GDP per capita, your aviation industry will remain stagnated because, let's face it, actually is. We can pick metrics out of the air if we like and say that it's grown, but unless you are growing in a realistic way in terms of profitability and business size growing realistically, not just because they can't get aircraft outside, so they're ordering they can't get their aircraft which is outside, so they're ordering aircraft to operate leases. That's not growth. So we need to really be looking at the genuine metrics and making sure legislation helps with that. Traffic growth potential is another driver of investment. Now, Nigeria has got potential of traffic growth, but this is limited to certain assumptions being met. Now, you have got a large country which is very difficult to reach by road or by rail, or any other mode of transport, due to safety reasons, lack of infrastructure, lack of connectivity in a transmodal way across the country. So traffic growth, because population is growing and GDP per capita should be growing, despite the little blips that we've had recently, but generally the belief is that this will grow in the future. So there is definitely traffic growth potential, but if the decisions which need to be made along the way are not made, that potential will not be realized. And so the legislative, regulatory environment needs to not stunt the potential, but create an enabling environment for that potential to grow. Another driver of investment, airline yield and profitability. And that's a difficult one in Africa, not just in Nigeria. Yields are typically low when it comes to Africa, and profitability is, almost not seen apart from one or two instances. And it's not coming just from the airlines. With those ones, it's coming from the other parts of the business which they have. It's not just passenger services, but it might be cargo, it might be MRO, it might be leasing, it might be a number of other things. So in order to have yields and profitability in Africa, you need to broaden the reach of airline businesses so that they can attract investment. Another driver of investment is cost of capital versus return on investment. Now, in aviation, particularly in Nigeria, we've got high costs of capital matched with a low return on investment. So it doesn't make it attractive to an investor. So we need to work on how do we get the cost of capital down and how do we improve return on investment. Return on investment obviously is impacted by the cost environment that we are in. And we are in a high cost for everything environment, bar labor in Nigeria. So we need to make sure that our regulations and legislation are helping us, not hindering us. Another driver of investment is the ability to repatriate funds, which a lot of people have spoken about today. And so it's not just, it doesn't just affect the foreign airlines, but it also affects the Nigerian airlines, because some of these aircraft which are out of the country for maintenance are still there because they're not able to get their funds out of Nigeria to be able to pay for these bills outside of the country. And so the ability to repatriate funds is not just a foreign airline problem, it is a problem of the environment, and it is a negative when it comes to attracting investment. I've heard some people say, well, these investors can spend their revenue in Nigeria rather than repatriate them out. That tells me they've got a fundamental misunderstanding of what business is about. You don't, keep your revenue and don't pay your costs. That's how businesses go bust. So if your costs have to be paid overseas, that money needs to go overseas so you can pay your costs. And it's the same with the Nigerian airlines. They need to pay their costs, which are incurring overseas. So they need access to funds as well. Another driver of investment is rule of law and contract enforcement. So we have signed up to all sorts of laws. But what I find in Nigeria, and what other people find in Nigeria, is that the implementation and the application of these laws are what I would call sometime-ish. They're not consistent. They're not predictable. And because of that, people are worried about the high cost of contract enforcement. If you're a leasing company and you've got to come to Nigeria to try to get your aircraft back, and you're met with police and army and anybody that can be paid to come and intimidate a lessor is off-putting to a lessor. So quite often from my conversations, because of that hassle factor, they charge a rate. So if they have to abandon the aircraft, they've made their money at some point. So it's something which needs to be addressed to reduce those costs. Another driver of investment, I would say, like global factors. Nigeria is in competition with other regions or other countries in Africa, and it's also in competition for investment from other regions. In order to make a case for investment in Nigeria, you need to really kind of benchmark yourself against what the investor could potentially get from these other countries and regions, and pitch yourself in a way that makes Nigeria more attractive. And so you can't pitch yourself if you don't know what's going on elsewhere out the country in terms of profitability of airlines, in terms of connectivity, aircraft utilization, and operating costs, etc. And so you kind of need to not just keep your head in, to be a bit more global, even whilst being domestic. Because if you're trying to attract outside investment, that is a global activity. And investment doesn't necessarily need to be a foreign investment. I hear a lot that Nigeria wants to attract foreign investment. Really, it should want to attract investment, because Nigerian investors are investing globally as well. And if they don't see the opportunity of a return on investment in Nigeria, they will go to the environment or country or region where they will potentially get a return on investment. So those global factors affect both domestic investment and foreign investment into aviation in Nigeria. Of investment, and these are not in order of priority. I should have said that at the top. I just dropped a list down of the things which come up all the time. Connectivity and location. Now, when people look at Nigeria and they look at the size of Nigeria and they look at the number of airports in Nigeria, they get excited about the opportunity that Nigeria presents, until they dig a bit deeper and you see that a lot of these airports are unviable. So you have a lot of airports which are just been created by governors for whatever purpose, political purposes. I won't say the other purpose, but we all know what that purpose is. And you can't run a successful airline operation to a lot of these airports. There's no seriousness that's gone in behind the development of these airports. A lot of them are sunset operating airports or not operating really at all. And so when people hear about, oh, the opportunity in terms of connectivity within Nigeria, and because of the location of Nigeria, the connectivity across the continent, there is a issue when it comes to the reality faced on ground. And so regulatory, legislative environment needs to address those issues. And if it means that by law, states can't just build airports which are then handed over to FAN, that's what needs to happen, because it's putting a burden of costs on FAN. It's putting, and that burden is transferred to airlines, and then that burden is transferred to passengers. And so we are in a very negative cycle of costs, because there has been no legislation which has stopped states building unviable airports and then just handing them over to FAN. Perhaps before handing them over to FAN, they need to find a way of perhaps, engaging local investors, maybe doing some sort of PPP, maybe trying to attract an airline to have it as a base by lowering the costs of operations. Setting things up so that airlines can operate from them will enhance the viability of these airports. And then from these airports, we can have increased connectivity across regions of Africa, and potentially international as well. There is a huge debate about the foreign airlines and their market access and flying into different airports within Nigeria. But I've looked at the data, which a lot of people haven't, and it's actually beneficial to the domestic airlines for these foreign airlines to fly into these airports, not for them to fly between the airports. So when we're talking about what is good for Nigeria and what is not good for Nigeria, we need to be clear what we are talking about, because based on the data and based on the experience that we've had, actually, the airlines flying into these non-Lagos and non-Abuja destinations means that domestic airlines end up flying people to that location and from that location, because quite a lot of the time people have chosen that flight due to timing, or whether it was they are closer to where their final destination is going to be, and it may not be Kaduna, it may not be Kano, it may not be Enugu, it may not be Port Harcourt, but because of your timing, maybe you're trying to reach Nigeria for a particular reason, the timing of that flight enabled you to spend less time traveling, less time staying in a hotel for a local transit the following day, because most people in their right minds don't try and do that transit on the same day, because Nigeria isn't really geared up to that. So typically, if you're catching an international flight, you'll stay a night in Lagos or Abuja the night before you travel, fly in domestically from wherever you're coming from, and that adds cost to your trip. It also adds increased travel time, because rather than doing it in one day, you're now taking 2 days to travel to your destination. Another driver of investment is competition and market liberalization. And market liberalization, I talked a bit before, because of obviously SATAM is an element of market liberalization. We're still talking about bilateral air service agreements when Africa should be talking about multilateral air service agreements. We shouldn't be having to have all these restrictions flying within Africa. That would give the opportunity of growing the aviation industry within Africa a huge advantage. And that advantage has been realized elsewhere. So market liberalization in all its facets need to be addressed, whether it's legislation or regulations. We need to really make it happen. And visas are one of the ways that they restrict the market. They say people can come, but then they don't allow visas to be processed from Nigerian origin to whatever African destination. And I always find it very odd that as somebody with a foreign passport, I can travel to more destinations in Africa without a visa than an African can. That has to change, and that's frankly ridiculous. And so we need to remove as many of these restrictions and encourage market liberalization and encourage competition, because competition has a way of enabling new business models, new airline types to occur. At the moment, we don't really have competition. We have a lot of airlines in Nigeria, but they're kind of like mostly running a similar type of business. There isn't a lot of like model development when it comes to that. So everybody is competing pretty much on the same routes, sometimes the same time of flying. And that is not really helpful, because all it does is it splits the existing passenger numbers by even more airlines. And so unless you've got competition within airports, within regions, you know, and costs lowered to attract these airlines, really, we haven't really got competition. And so we've got to look at what impact does legislation have on these drivers? Are they likely to generate growth or restrict the market? And so you know, one of the things which we do need to do is slow down in decision making, so that we're making the right decisions that's going to be beneficial for the industry and not have a negative. And sometimes there are unintended negative consequences which could have been foreseen, which act as a negative driver for investment, because anybody from a developed aviation system will be looking at what goes on in Nigeria and think, what are they doing? You know, why are they doing this? These are often the questions that I get in my inbox and, you know, messages all day, every day, because from the outside, well, a lot of the decisions don't necessarily look like they're being taken for the right reasons. So one of the things is we've got a 5 key list of objectives, and one of those is revenue generation for the government. Now, revenue generation for the government means that you will most likely end up with higher costs.
Cindy, sorry for interrupting you, but you have about 5 minutes more to conclude your presentation.
That's fine. I'll be done.
Okay. Yeah.
So when you have a revenue generation objective for the government, it means that you are seeing the industry as a cash cow, not as a potential strategic development, critical development partner for the country. And so because of that, you've got things like the IGR requirement, where the agencies have to hand over money to the government. It was 25%, and there was talk of it being 40%. How will the industry be able to survive without revenue being retained within the industry for capital development, and lowering the unit costs? Because we've seen how it works with customs and people like that. If you give them a revenue generation objective, that is their focus, and it's nothing else. It's not growing agricultural cargo. That's because that doesn't the same impact on them just charging high fees. And so you have a disjointed strategic objective, where on one hand you've got revenue generation for government, and then on the other hand you've got growth. If your objective is growth, you will generate revenues anyway. So I think we need to look at those things. Now, there are a lot of positive prospects for Nigeria. Having said all of that, when you look forward in terms of potential, whether it's flight revenue, annual growth rate, or projected market volume, passenger growth, user penetration, revenue per user, total revenues, or GDP, there are some very positive statistics. But as I said, these are all based on assumptions. These things will not happen unless the right decisions are made. And so what we end up with are the negative realities of Nigeria, of high unit costs of operations, leading to doubling of fares of a 1-hour flight over, you know, a year or so, low aircraft utilization, schedule reliability, OTP, cost of capital in double digits, limited private equity interest, no hedge products in Forex or fuel. Aviation fuel obviously was low in early 2022, and it raced close to 1,000 naira, more recently. We've got scarcity, high cost of Forex, exchange rate volatility. We've got high cost of aircraft leasing, maintenance, insurance. Nigeria tops Africa's list of trapped funds. We've got multiple charges, taxes paid by airlines. We've got policy flip-flops, lack of appropriate notice of imminent changes. We've seen that recently with the airport fiasco. Poor infrastructure to support airlines, no hub, transit missing, lack of airport capacity at main airports of Lagos and Abuja, limited MRO or AOG access. And critically, we've got lack of data, poor access to timely data, doesn't help the industry and really creates stagnant growth. You can't chase a target. You don't even know what that target is. And having data which misrepresents the reality of the situation isn't helpful to anybody, because anybody who can do maths and calculate will be able to see that some of the statistics that come out of Nigeria are not accurate. And another negative reality that needs to be countered using, policy or legislative processes, market access due to error political issues. So obviously SATAM is one of the biggest ones, but we've seen the UAE saga, and pretty much every country in Africa, whenever an airline from Nigeria wants to fly there, comes up with problems. So these are some of the negative realities on ground. And so we really need to look at the legislative and policy impacts. And, and do we see overreach when it comes to some of these impacts? Because some of the decision making, I don't think are necessarily decisions that should be coming from the regulator. It should be left to airlines to decide their business model, more and more. And, because aviation business does not exist in a vacuum, but within the context of its operating environment and governing regulations, we need to make sure that aviation regulation and policy is harmonized across the world, across Africa even, to ensure consistent levels of safety and consumer protection. Civil aviation authorities should be responsible for determining policy which determines the use of airspace, economic regulation of airports, licensing and financial fitness of airlines, and consumer protection. But legislation should support growth whilst maintaining safety. And so what Nigeria needs to decide is legislation overreaching and negatively impacting on operations. And this is my last slide, so I'll be finished in a minute. Legislation as a barrier to growth or a restraint on profit should be avoided at all costs. Legislation can help grow the aviation industry, or it can act as a barrier to attracting investment. You've got to decide what are the policy objectives and the intended effects. What policy options have been considered, including any alternatives to regulation. And some of the decisions that have been made that you've got to wonder what was the thinking and how is this going to help, are things like fleet size and maintenance timing requirements, which are outside the OEM's time frame. Competition policy and cabotage, where you allow foreign airlines to fly between Nigerian airports when you wouldn't be able to do that as a Nigerian airline anywhere in the world. Yes, you could fly to multiple destinations, but from that destination, you need to get yourself back to Nigeria and then fly back again. So that's something which we really need to look at, how legislation, and I know OAL has been marketing or promoting the Fly Nigeria Act, but we also need to look at cabotage and how that can benefit the aviation industry. We also need to look at how legislation impacts market entry, domestic market entry and international market entry. Market access, including freedoms of the air, overflight, non-traffic stops, traffic rights. A lot of people circumvent Nigeria when it comes to overflight because of the costs. So we're not really, creating an environment whereby we're making Nigeria an attractive destination. We need to look at licensing, renewals, permits. We need to look at ownership structures, foreign ownership restrictions. I do believe some need to be in place because of the BASA agreements, and we need to look at the air service agreements to make sure that they are fit for purpose. Cancelling them without negotiation is not the language that we should be hearing from Nigeria, because that sort of thing is what people worry about. But negotiation, discussion, all perfectly feasible. We also need to look at tax, tariffs and charges and see whether these are acting as a barrier to growth and a restraint on profit, and look at modelling what would happen if you had a lower unit cost environment, and whether that would then translate to lower fares for passengers and then be able to generate increased passenger growth. And then, of course, we can't be in an industry without consumers. So we need to make sure that consumer protection is actually helping to grow the industry and isn't a barrier to growth of the industry. And I think that we need to have a bit more consumer service focus when it comes to the airline industry, because that helps with value creation, it helps with brand reputation management, it helps loyalty, it helps generate growth in your business. So it's not something you should see just as a hammer to do your business harm, but it can actually be looked at as something that you can create value from. If you protect your consumers, your consumers will protect you. So all legislation should be analysed to identify the growth enablers and growth barriers, and to provide a full economic assessment, including costs and benefits, before they are implemented. And that's it. I'm done.
And thank you, Cindy, for that presentation. You've actually unpacked a lot of things. And I like the caution that you've made here, which is that, while legislation is good for strengthening the sector, we must balance investments and protecting our local business environment. Thank you so much for that presentation. I would like to bring to our attention that we now have in our midst the Honorable Minister of Aviation and Aerospace, Festus Keyamo, SAN. I also want to state that we also have in our midst his learned brother, Dr. Olisa Agbakoba. I don't know if Dr. Agbakoba will want to say one or two things before I invite the learned SAN Festus Keyamo to make his presentation or goodwill message.
So I think I'll yield the floor to the minister.
Okay. Honorable Minister, you can give us your goodwill. I think you're muted. Honorable Minister, I think you're muted. Okay.
Okay, can you hear me loud and clear?
I can hear you.
Yes, you can.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I apologize for joining at this time. I asked for this special permission to join at this time because I'm 6 hours behind you. And I didn't want to wake up by 5 o'clock in the morning when you started. So I apologize. I'm not sure of the protocol list, but I know my brother is there. My learned brother, Olisa Agbakoba, distinguished guests, and the industry players who are here present. If I've left you out, please, I apologize. My duty is just to give a goodwill message. I have somewhere I'm rushing to this morning, so I'll just give my goodwill message. But before doing that, I listened to the last speaker, and I just want to quickly correct something the last speaker said about some of the KPIs I might have set for myself. She quite interesting lecture, and I did enjoy it. I met it halfway through. It has given me a lot of insight into a couple of things I'm working on. But she mentioned something about revenues, because I did mention that as one of my KPIs. She said that should not be the focus of government, to raise revenue in the industry for government. But I think if she reads my KPIs, again, very much, she will realize that I did not say raise revenues for government. That's not the language I use. I said optimizing I use that language advisedly, optimizing the revenue generation capacity of the agencies. So that does not mean you have to raise revenues for government. It's just to optimize your capacity to raise revenues. For instance, I'll give an example. In Lagos, for example, FAN, in one of their airport gates, they are doing about 100 million naira per month. However, the capacity is to generate about 240 million naira per month. You know, though when these barriers go up and down, you know, they count them. They count the number of times the barriers go up and down when vehicles pass. So by that, the average is about 240 million naira they should raise a month. But why are they doing 100 million? And I'm told that most of the other monies go to, they are for dignitaries, VIPs, who are given stickers, free stickers. And so those people, and then of course, military personnel, senators, all kinds of people who pass, who are not paying. You know, and I said, why? You know, why should they do that? That even me, at some point, I will have to pay myself. That we should optimize the revenue generation capacity of the agency. That doesn't mean it's just to raise revenues for government, but at least raise revenues for yourself. Optimize your capacity to raise revenues for yourself. And that's what I said. You know, so I just want to correct that. A couple of things I would have loved to say here, but because of time constraints. So I'm just to go straight to my goodwill message. I've said I'm delighted to be invited to give a goodwill message today at this significant webinar on repositioning the aviation sector for revenue generation and growth. It is a privilege to address this distinguished gathering of industry leaders, experts, and stakeholders who share a common vision for the future of aviation in Nigeria and, of course, Africa. I will begin by saluting the commitment, initiative, and drive of the law firm of Mrs. Olisa Agbakoba Legal for organizing the webinar event, and most importantly, for creating an advocacy platform where contemporary national issues are x-rayed and relevant policy inputs are vested for national growth. Our aviation sector is not just an industry, it's a vital lifeline connecting nations, enabling trade, fostering tourism, and driving economic growth. The theme of this webinar aptly addresses one of the priority areas of the administration of President Ahmed Bola Tinubu, repositioning the aviation sector for revenue generation and growth. Role of legislation is apt and timely, especially now that discussions are taking place in a number of fora on how best to use public policy to harness national potentials for growth and development, most especially in the aviation industry in Nigeria. Indeed, an efficient air transport contributes to economic growth and development. Data from the National Bureau of Statistics shows that the aviation sector has contributed about 117 billion naira, which is 4% of the national GDP in the first quarter of 2022. It supports about 200,000 jobs and pays about 8.5 billion naira in tax annually. It is a feat, and we are committed to upscaling the achievement by latching on the renewed hope agenda of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, GCFRO. As a ministry, our mandate, amongst others, is the formulation and management of the government's aviation policies, overseeing of air transportation, airport development and maintenance, provision of aviation infrastructural services, and other needs. To achieve the mandate, the ministry developed an aviation road master plan, which clearly defines what we need to do to achieve our objectives. It is also instructive to states that upon assumption of office, I have reviewed the progress made so far vis-a-vis the existing gaps. Accordingly, we are already looking at focus areas which are encapsulated in a 5-point agenda, namely, strict compliance with national laws and regulations and international obligations. These are the KPIs I set for myself, and I developed this myself. 2, improvement and development of infrastructure for passenger convenience. 3, support for the growth and sustenance of local airline businesses, whilst holding them to the highest international standards. for human capacity development within the industry, and optimization of revenue generation. As the Minister of Aviation and Aerospace Development, I am deeply committed to this agenda. In these challenging times, characterized by evolving market dynamics and global uncertainties, the need to reposition our aviation sector for sustainable growth has never been more pressing. It requires vision, resilience, finances, and collaboration. I'll just pause here for 1 second to reflect on what the last speaker said and all the the negative things she said about how why our industry, why people are scared, investors are scared of coming to invest in our industry and all of that. But just to assure that, we are not God. We are not the like Voltron who will come and save everybody, But we will try our best. We'll try our best to reverse these negative trends and the negative perception. For those agencies under me who perhaps make it difficult for investors to come and invest in terms of the kind of underhand dealings within the industry and all that. For us, we will try our best. We'll try our best to be in the gap and stop all of that. Some of us, before coming here, we prosecuted for the EFCC. I've been a prosecutor for EFCC for more than a decade before I was called up to public service as a private prosecutor for the EFCC. And if you look back, really, most of the ministers in the past who have been charged to court after office for one thing or the other have been aviation ministers. I don't have to name them, but most of the aviation ministers in the past, they have abused their offices, or they have alleged to have abused their offices, and they've been charged to court for one thing or the other. That is how volatile this kind of this industry can be, and I realize that so much. And coming from my background, I understand exactly the minefields and how to avoid those minefields. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the Nigerian aviation industry is going through a new round of transformation adjustments, such as a 5-point agenda for the growth of the Nigerian aviation value chain. The ministry is looking forward to a new phase of partnership and collaboration by leveraging the immense opportunities in the sector to attract foreign direct investment. I was just talking about that now. And joint venture partnership with heads of international economic organizations, presidents of transnational corporations, and principals of leading privately owned enterprises. Legislation provides the overarching framework within which the aviation sector operates. It is the bedrock upon which we build our vision for the industry's future. Thus, it is incumbent upon our legislators to draft policies that promote growth, encourage investment, and ensure safety and security. The aviation sector is, first and foremost, a safety and security industry. We ensure through legislation that mandatory safety standards provided by the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, are incorporated in our national laws. As such, the role of legislation and indeed legislatures in Nigeria's aviation sector is critical for the development, regulation, and growth of the aviation industry in the country. Legislators, comprising the Senate and the House of Representatives of the National Assembly, play various roles to ensure the sector operates efficiently and contributes to Nigeria's economic development. They have the authority to allocate budgets and approve funding for aviation, for aviation projects, including airport construction and maintenance, procurement of equipment, and safety enhancements. Ensuring adequate funding is crucial for the sector's growth and development. Legislators also provide oversight by monitoring the implementation of aviation policies and ensuring that both the Federal Ministry of Aviation and Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority, NCA, adhere to regulations and carry out their functions effectively. As the representatives of the people, the legislators hold a unique position in this partnership to ensure that our aviation sector, amongst other sectors, reaches its full potential. repositioning the aviation sector for revenue generation and growth is a collective endeavor requiring a harmonious partnership between the executive, legislature, and indeed private sector stakeholders. Nigeria is signatory to about 29 international aviation treaties and conventions. Ratifying these international treaties and conventions are made possible through legislation. Legislators play a role in ratifying these agreements and ensuring that they are domesticated in our national laws, which in effect have significant impact on international air travel and trade, and that Nigeria opposes its international obligations therein. We must remember also that a safe and efficient aviation sector is not just an economic imperative, but a moral obligation to the millions of passengers who trust our skies every day. At this junction, I wish to encourage the Nigerian private sector to deepen their collaboration with the Ministry for the growth of the Nigerian aviation industry. I am optimistic that stakeholders participating in today's webinar session will build on their enviable track records to come up with appropriate strategies for repositioning the aviation sector for revenue generation and growth through instrumentality of legislation. As a government, we are committed to initiatives and policy inputs that will stimulate investment across the aviation value chain. I'm confident that this webinar will serve as a catalyst for transformative change in the sector, and I look forward to the outcomes that will emerge from it as we work together to reposition the aviation sector for a future filled with promise and prosperity. On this note, I wish you a fruitful session, and I thank you all for your time and for inviting me. God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. For the goodwill message. Dr. Agbakoba, I don't know if you want to say something.
Well, it's to thank the Honorable Minister for a brilliant policy speech. And I like the challenge that he has thrown out to the private sector to assist him in delivering his aviation sector strategy. And I can assure him that that is exactly what we intend to do. And I particularly thank him for finding time to come on, in spite of what is obviously terribly crowded schedule. I can see he was just in a shirt, meaning that his time is really, really tight. So I thank you, my learned brother, for giving us a very, very robust goodwill message. So it's up to us now to shake hands with you on the issues that you have set out. I identify 4 key players. You as Honorable Minister, the executive, the National Assembly who make law, the MDAs, most important, those who actually bear the brunt of the marketplace, the various airlines we have. How can they expand? That's been the rallying cry for Nigerians. How can we have? I was to go, just to give you a quick example, I was to go to Botswana in December, and I tried every route to get there. And the shortest, quickest was 3 days. So that tells you the state of the aviation industry and what we need to do to build it up. So the Honourable Minister, I thank you very much. Collins, I thank you for this webinar. We look forward to the report which the Minister said we should present to him. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Agbakoba, for attending. Thank you so much, sir. So we'll go back to the panel session. I will now invite Dr. Alex Mubach to make his presentation, but I'll do a brief introduction of Dr. Alex Mubach. Dr. Alex is a distinguished personality in the business world with a wealth of experience in various domains, including banking, investment, finance, technology, fintech, communications, and aviation. Mr. Mubach is currently the president of the Aircraft Owners and Pilot Association, and he also holds the esteemed position of chairman of the board at the West African Fashion Council. He's the founder of Smile Air, and he has been instrumental in repositioning struggling enterprises within fiercely competitive sectors. His expertise lies in the act of organizational startups and revitalization, and he is known for his exceptional ability to tackle seemingly insurmountable challenges in diverse industries. I will now invite Dr. Muba to make his presentation. Dr. Muba, are you still with us? You can go ahead with your presentation. You are muted. Dr. Muba.
My apologies. I was trying to unmute myself. And I was having a bit of a challenge with that. Sorry about that. Very good. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. And standing existing protocols, it's a pleasure to be here this afternoon. It's quite difficult when you speak towards the end of an event where so many eminent experts have covered the matters that before us, but I will try to bring some more information into this discussion. So basically, you've done some introduction of myself. I've added a few here, but let me move right on to the paper. So my presentation is based on the concept paper presented to me by OAL, and I am drawing from that and focusing strictly on the issues that are raised, given the timelines to do that. So I emphasize the things you raised at the beginning. There are 5,000 airlines, 25,000 aircraft, 41,000 airports, 65 million jobs globally, 2.7. Whereas in the case of Nigeria, the economic contribution to GDP, and Cindy spoke about the fact that GDP is a good indicator of sizing a market. It's only 4% contribution to our GDP. The character of our industry is that the average lifespan of the airline industry is 5 to 10 years. There have been 150 airlines registered as of 2000, and so on. And I'm using a slide. Basically, so the issues that were raised are that were raised by the concept paper is the lack of absence of a local content policy and legislation, the fact that Nigeria is signatory to over 90 BASA agreements. These BASAs have been entered without due consideration to the economic impact. 25 airlines, these are OAL data. 25 airlines have operated into Nigeria. Only one Nigerian airline operates internationally, and just one or two operate within the region. Moving on, staying with that, you heard the minister speak, and you've heard other speakers speak, that the aim, one of the aims here is to reverse the trends of what's going on through the Nigerian sector roadmap, which basically focuses on infrastructure and so on. And therefore, the aim is to increase the sector's contribution beyond the 0.4% to GDP. And so there are roadmaps, and the minister has spoken to the fact that he's focused his efforts on these roadmaps around his specific KPIs that he has himself written. I'm staying with the issues that I identified. One second. And so we also stated is that the firm OAL has proposed a Fly Nigeria bill. It's been around for a long time. We don't understand why such innovative ideas are not implemented, and so on. And then the real challenge is that the aviation sector is more tilted towards foreign carriers. So we face these challenges we're talking about significant over $700 million owed to foreign airlines that they wish to repatriate and cannot repatriate. And as the chairman of AP spoke, there's also Nigerian carrier funds that need to go abroad to pay for services that can, in many cases, be done within our local economy. And those funds are also frozen. So my next slide says, we've talked so much about legislation, and Cindy's talked to us about investments. We've talked about so many issues. So my first question I asked when I was given this task was to ask this basic question: can we legislate airline success? Okay, and that is really the aim at the end of the day. What can we do about airlines? I put some pictures of our success stories, where we have shown that within 5 to 10 years, most airlines that come about die off into the horizon. Sahara Reporters published a list of over 58 airlines that have been created and gone. When I was giving this paper to peer review, people asked me, why have you highlighted 3 airlines? And I said, one was an airline I ran, but fortunately for me, it did not collapse while I was there. I ran it very well. I left, but it collapsed ultimately. A few other airlines that have collapsed have also come back to me to see how they can come about. Those are the airlines I've highlighted in that presentation. So let's now get to my part of it, hoping that I don't repeat what's been stated earlier. So the industry as a whole has ridden from one crisis to the other. While the fact still remains that demand has been created by the fact that, as Cindy indicated, we do not have alternative modal transport. So our rail system doesn't give us national coverage. There isn't even a regional rail system in place. Our road infrastructure is a challenge, and so on. Even high fares have not discouraged the growth of the industry, because the reality of it is that the people have no choice but aviation, essentially. So the challenges faced by Nigerian airlines cannot be limited. And that is one of the issues that was raised in the OL paper, cannot be limited to all corporate governance or trying to solve the problem through the issue of forced alliances. So the challenge we face is that foreign exchange in our market is required for airlines, which is not available. They need it for virtually every part of this business. That's been stated earlier. COVID-19 created challenges for this industry, but it required quite significantly. Last year, the industry grew 44.4%. And so the huge inflation has had impacts on airfares. But for anybody that understands this industry, it would surprise you that even though fares are rising due to the impact of inflation, if you look at the true cost over the last 23 years, fares have remained stagnant in dollar terms. So fares have not really increased. And so when we say fares have gone up, yes, they've gone up because the Naira impact, inflation, and other factors, but in true dollar terms, fares have not really gone up. And that is a challenge because everything else in the industry has been rising in prices. The industry has low return on capital, but other than the fact that this is an industry that pays 5% ticket charges, 5% cargo sales charges, passenger service, charter sales charge, aircraft inspection fees, simulator inspection fees. All these are statutory fees collected by the government in spite of the fact that the environment is really, really, really tough. And I list a number of them. You can get my slide. I have only 10 minutes. I can't name all of them, but they're quite significant. And so the challenge for the Nigerian aviation industry is that aviation is a global business. So you can't look at the industry and say, these are Nigerian challenges. They're global in nature. So we benchmark our performance against carriers around the world. And as already been indicated earlier by the chairman of Airpeace and other speakers, whereas in many countries, airlines have access to funds at 1.5% to 2.5%, and Nigerian airlines have to pay 22 to 23, 25%, they are still competing with each other in this same global market space. And so the question then becomes, is debt a viable means for funding this business? And Cindy spoke to this issue quite a bit. So basically, the lifespan in the industry is short, given many, many, many challenges that the industry faces. And in a discussion with one of my, as I'm also the vice president of the Aviation Safety Roundtable, a discussion with one of my former executives, he raised the point that maybe the challenge in our economy is due to lack of ineffective oversight and enforcement. We will see to that as I speak to my paper later on. So, in asking that question, legislating success, I had to ask the question, what are the factors required for business success? And a good reference always is to look at what Harvard says about the subject, because they look at it quite extensively. And they've said the key elements to success are to exploit before you explore. Cindy spoke to that somewhat in terms of metrics you need. And we often find airlines say, well, when we got into the business, we found these challenges. These are things that ought to have been known to you if we had looked at proper insight. The other one she spoke about was diversifying your business portfolio. And again, Cindy spoke to that matter by saying that the industry requires you to look beyond what you do, which is carrying passengers, to other opportunities to grow and succeed in your business. The third point raised by Harvard is to remember your mistakes. You know, you need the memory of an elephant to succeed in this business, because with so many failures, one must go back and ask, why have these things happened, and how can we mitigate them? And then the fourth one given by Harvard was be conservative about change. I provided a link for the full document that would help anybody that is interested in examining these issues further. It is not that we have not attempted to legislate aviation for success. And I will give some sample examples. The CAC increased capital for airline business so that there is supposedly enough capital to run the business. But what we ended up doing was collecting fees for stamp duties and other charges, which did not really impact the real capital required to run the business. Now, the NCAA has come up with new legislation, in essence, along its own guidelines to say, well, you need a minimum of 6 aircraft to get into this business so that we're sure you have enough aircraft to run the business. And I asked the question, does CapEx ensure the endurance of your business, okay? Or have you created a bigger bottleneck to business success? There's also the thought or school of thought out there that says, maybe these airlines should merge so that they can be more successful. And therefore, I asked the question, are we still dealing with the capital issue? And can we really force mergers? Okay? So these are the things we have been doing as part of this process of solving the problem of airline success and longevity. Okay? And now, in addition, the civil aviation regulation has said, okay, we focus too much on the safety regulation. We need to look at economic regulation. And these are the actions that are taken. And then outside the industry as a whole, many people are looking at what can we do to create a more sustainable airline industry. I will get into that. So basically, what we try to do is to legislate airline success. And so the first question I asked, aviation in Nigeria, in most cases, are private businesses. Therefore, we must be careful as to how much legislation we want to introduce in the conduct of private business outside of the public good. An interesting article is the 1878 paper on the limits of state control of private business by Thomas Cooley of the University of Michigan. Secondly, while aviation is a regulated business globally, in the local context by the Nigerian Civil Aviation, there remains limits to how much control can be exerted in the conduct of business around its structure, including ownership and operations. We cannot force partnerships, we cannot force mergers, and such like through issues that can be surmounted by entrepreneurs. So when we increase these capital structures, there are obvious ways that entrepreneurs can overcome them. Therefore, we may, however, raise the bar to force appropriate structures, which may or may not be beneficial to the airline business. So I'm saying legislation is wonderful, but one must be careful in how we implement it. A key question that is often proposed, and validly so, is the governance structure, where airlines fail due to family members, friends, and cronies making decisions that they are not equipped to do. Cindy spoke to this in her investment presentation, and it was spoken to even by the chairman of the airpiece about these single airline structures. Therefore, the key question for me remains that what is the duty of legislation to ensure that a private business survives? We have to ask that question. Therefore, if our efforts are about state sustenance of an airline, then the airline business must be restructured in terms of whether they are essentially public entities where we have deeper regulation and processes, or we declare them essential services. And that remains a debate, even in terms of what do we do about this industry. Therefore, in doing all of this, we must ask ourselves what our objectives are. So in doing that, essentially, what do we want to do? We want to help airlines to grow. We should therefore not tie their hands with more legislation or do more intelligent legislation. We want airlines to be more profitable. So how do we eliminate a lot of the charges and bottlenecks to the industry? These are pain points for the airline industries. Consumers want lower fares. Therefore, what do we do about the airline cost operations to achieve these lower fares? How do we handle the high costs that the industry faces so savings can be passed on to the consumer? These are legitimate questions in achieving our goals. We think that corporate governance is a real problem. Shouldn't we therefore be looking at governance models in successful industries and apply them to the airline industry? We always talk about the challenges of the operating environment. And aviation is not the only business operating in this challenging environment. And we have seen that some industries are successful. Therefore, what are the principles we can borrow from them to ensure sustenance for this industry? So despite the economic challenges that Nigeria has faced, the financial service industry has grown multifold. So therefore, I ask, what are the lessons there and how can the guidelines in those industries be applied to create for a more sustainable aviation industry? 1 second, please. My screen, I lost my screen. 1 second. So, moving on, I get to the issue of, so how do we solve our problem? So solving the problem in the Nigerian aviation distress is not about infrastructure. We hear a lot about talk about airports and runways and things like that. Even though improvements will improve the experience, that's what the infrastructure is supposed to do. It is, however, about, as proposed in the concept paper, about building better airline businesses. There are two prospects that face the airline industry in Nigeria today. A well-run and well-capitalized airline will enter this industry and take out 90% of the players, and the picture will remain the same. And the cycle of starts and stops continues at the very best, extends the average life. The actions we take may extend the average life more than we've seen over the last 60 years. So we can essentially improve the odds by adopting some of the prudential guidelines in the financial service industry. We need to bring those guidelines to the aviation regulatory process, okay? Such as corporate governance, financial principles, capital requirements and reserves, even corporate structures favoring public over private structures. It may be more of these more public structures, so that we're relying less on debt and more on equity, which equity is cheaper funding, which is one of the challenges facing the industry. But in the end, we must recognize that sustenance is maintained by great leadership and teamwork. Cindy spoke a lot to that, about running a proper business. The pursuit of business excellence, exceeding customer expectations, operating under the golden rules, which is treating persons with high respect and courtesy, simplicity, and effective communication. The Flying Nigeria Bill, as floated by OAL, is something we should look very seriously into. We also begin, as the minister has called for, a review of ABASA and other aviation agreements. I would state now that the aviation roadmap has failed repeatedly. It is now time for a more holistic aviation roadmap, not an airline roadmap. We keep saying aviation roadmap, but when we look at that roadmap, we continue to see airline roadmap with MRO, etc. But we don't look at the proper aviation roadmap, which includes airlines, which includes general aviation. And that is why you have this problem of capacity challenges. I do not see in this industry where the airports and the airlines are engaging each other. You have the airlines engaging themselves on their issues, the airport dealing with infrastructure and challenges with costs and structures, but never an interface. And that is why we need a more holistic aviation roadmap that combines these elements to solve the problem. So, of course, government can help. Okay, foreign airlines have so much more capacity, and government cannot be accusing local airlines of lacking in capacity, but should rather help them to establish the capacity for the benefit of the country and the economy. We need to strengthen the Nigerian aviation sector. Remember, I said not the airline sector, for marketplace competitiveness, while creating structures that encourage Nigerians to take ownership of the industry in their buying choices. I state it's buying choices. We cannot force consumers to buy a particular product, but we need to engage them more so that they buy more Nigerian products, especially in this sector. We need to pass legislation that enables airlines to have access to competitive funding, acquisition, as well as other forex requirements. I want to emphasize this point. Funding must not be done in the typical black hole approach of the current intervention fund policies, where money is shared, the business is bankrupted, and all the parties disappear. We need to look at our bankruptcy laws. That's one thing that hasn't been spoken about, that do not let airlines reorganize and return to business. In many, many climates, most of these international airlines we admire have gone through multiple bankruptcy processes. Whereas in an economy, once you enter into a bankruptcy process, you get stuck in a point where nothing happens again. Then you have intervention agencies that come in and just deepen the problem, essentially. So we need to look at particularly at our bankruptcy laws. We need to review all aviation laws, policies, and related agreements, and produce fresh and more holistic aviation acts and industry policies. Government needs to deepen its infrastructure development along airports, maintenance facilities, and supporting infrastructure. Government infrastructure development must be done along with the strategic direction of the industry. That is, everybody is carried along, not airports doing its thing, airlines doing their thing, everybody else doing their thing. Government must also incentivize the development of the industry by looking at charges and other cost factors impacting the industry. Policies must reduce cost and bring additional benefits to consumers and the industry. I highlight from these discussions, we need to deal with our forex challenges and reserves for the aviation industry. We need to look at funding challenges and create the appropriate funding structures. We need to address contracts and international policies stacked against us. We need to look at our bilateral and multilateral agreements. We need to limit access to our airports in the national interest. It can't be this, you arrive here and go to 3 points and so on, and it's not working to our market's interest. We need to ensure that airlines and airports engage each other on the industry needs. We need to build on existing resources, such as the smaller MROs. It's not like we don't have MROs and we need to start over. We need to expand them so that the country can benefit from localizing some of these costs that are going abroad. We need to look at issuer training that's been brought up, but all parties must play their roles. So, of course, right. So the challenges to the industry are not unique. All parts of the world face these challenges, but regulators, policymakers, and airlines must address these issues, and legislation can support growth and success. Legislation should be used to support growth and success, not the way that is often proposed. Key success factors in airlines are overcoming the challenges. Here are some issues raised by a couple of professors, which must be for the airline itself to product innovation. Cindy spoke to that earlier on. Building better reputations, meeting consumer demands, addressing competition and cost, as well as planning, forecasting, technology. We need these tools within this industry. For airlines, we must more holistically address the aviation industry and not just airlines, as they complement each other. Airlines shouldn't be looking to government to do what they can do, like maintenance facilities and the likes. The single air transport market is coming. We signed up on that deal, and whether we like it or not, it is coming. The African Continental Free Trade Area is coming. Both create a continent-wide domestic market. And therefore, what will we do? Will we be bystanders in that market and be left behind? That's an issue we have to address. With that, I end. I hope I kept my time. I always emphasize that tomorrow starts today. Thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you very much.
Dr. Moba, you kept the time. In fact, you kept the time. I'll now quickly invite Mr. Olumide to make his presentation. I don't know if he's still with us. I know
I'm sure he wants to unmute himself.
Okay, yes. Okay, he's here. Okay. So let me do a brief introduction of Mr. Olumide Okunayo. I hope I pronounced it well. He is a highly accomplished professional with extensive experience in the aviation industry. He currently serves as the General Secretary of the Aviation Roundtable and is a non-executive board member of Zenith Travel and Consult. Additionally, he holds the position of Executive Director in Bin Mariri Nigeria Limited, a general merchandise company registered with the CAC. Olumide is an IATA scholar with certification in airline management, integration program, and other certificates such as ICAO, flight safety and aircraft operations, and a host of others. He is also an avid aviation analyst and has made several very valuable contributions, presentations, and articles on most media outlets. Now make your presentation.
Thank you. Protocols in place, saving me for the last. Anyway, but before I go into my presentation, which actually has to do with the consumer perspective of the team today, which is repositioning the aviation sector for revenue, I need to react to some issues raised so far. Let me start with the Fly Nigeria Act. Sometime in 2009, I met with the minister then, Ejina Motoba, and we spoke at his stakeholders conference, and at that conference, we presented the Fly Nigerian Act. He asked for email and we continued conversing. Then finally, we prepared a document for him to take to the Federal Executive Council. And the paper document of the Flight Nigerian Act was taken there. On his presentation there, they asked him, so you want us to give public funds to an airline owned by Mr. Rumeni Johnson, which just give because that's the only airline operating. And you see, it comes to that issue of ownership and our perception. And it was on that basis, after accepting the bill, it was thrown out to the Federal Executive Council and has not returned. Have that status of ownership changed till today? Has it not been affecting airlines when they are asked to operate outside Nigeria and they are left alone to go and pursue all the documentations to operate those flights? Have we addressed that ownership? This was raised by Sydney concerning the IPO, and I think this is something we all need to look at and see if Nigeria is ready to give the Commonwealth to airlines owned by individuals. Again, I have also listened to the issue around legislating the industry. In the past, like Alex just said, they asked for capital framework, and at the end of the day, most of the airlines come up with documents and declare that they've raised 250 million for the capital. And barely 2 months after that, 2 or 3 of them are falling. Fell and never to return. We have given monies to the airlines, and on giving them, like Alex said, they get the loan and disappear into liquidation. Are we going to continue like this? I want to cite 3 countries: Mexico, South Africa, and Morocco. We have more passengers flying in those markets than Nigeria. Mexico has only 7 domestic airlines and has 1.53 million seats available for the week, per week. The same thing with South Africa. South Africa has just 6 to 7 airlines. Morocco has 6. So why do we want to continue to burden the passengers, to burden with airlines with 1 aircraft or 2 aircraft? I think I support the regulatory consolidation process being initiated by the NCA this time around, asking for equipment rather than cash. Now, coming to my presentation, it's a consumer perspective. And if you notice today, the minister just said it was ready to support the local and national airlines, provided they also meet with their obligations as obtained in the international market. I also heard a part of Sydney's presentation that for the aviation to grow, there must be strong consumer protection processes in place. And that's what has brought me to the topic today. Do we have it in place? Yes, we do. The biggest elephant in the room for customers of air transport now are flight delays, dissatisfaction, and safety. Other issues such as fares, connectivity schedule have been handled by other speakers. Growth in the industry is also measured by increase in the consumers of our products. To keep those who are presently their right and satisfaction needs to be oiled by the services we provide and protection by legislation. And if you look at the NCA Act, just like the DG said in his presentation, that Part 19 is the one that is in charge and is taking care of issues concerning by consumer protection. And Part 19 says, for our civil aviation regulation deals with passengers' rights, responsibilities and obligations of airline, travel agents, and tour operators. It also addresses consumer protection issues, assistance for persons with reduced mobility, persons with disability, aircraft accident victims and their families, and compensations for denied boarding, delayed or lost baggage. Delays and delays and cancellation of flight. I would skip because of the time frame now. If you look at it, Part 19, 6.1, airlines, when an operating air carrier reasonably expects a flight to be delayed beyond the scheduled time and the partial, HR provide the passengers with reasons for delay within 30 minutes after the scheduled departure time. And to say what you're going to do. If it's 2 hours, you provide refreshment. If it's 3 hours delay, you reimburse. And if you have to stay 10 to 4 p.m. or you're going to an airport that is closed, you have to provide accommodation and transport. These are the laws that are in place to protect the passengers. And it comes to schedule change. And when you want to change you're giving enough time that you must give your passenger, your clients enough notice that you are changing the schedule of their flight. Do they have such notice? Payment for cancelled flights. And let's go to part 19.7 now. An operating airline shall not be obliged to pay compensation for cancellation if it can prove that the cancellation is caused by extraordinary circumstances. This is beyond the control of the airline. And maybe probably because the airline then have complained about these extraordinary circumstances. That's why it's difficult for the NCAA to implement some of these. If you notice when he was making his presentation, when they go to part 19, he said, yes, the part 19 is important to them, but they're having issues because they're trying to strike a balance of how to make the airline survive and also not to lose passengers, and hence there's been some difficulty. Now, I will get to the extraordinary circumstances, but going to 19.7.14, the burden of proof concerning any question as to whether and when the passenger has been informed of the cancellation of the flight shall rest with the operating airline. Whether it is extraordinary circumstances, it is the operating airline that's supposed to bring the passenger. The compensation is referred to here for passengers are cash, electronic transfer, bank transfer, order. Orders are in the slides, which I will hand over to the organizers. Again, in that same part 1912 for now, persons with reduced mobility or special needs at every airport and airline and ground handling company shall provide facilities at the airports to enhance the movement of persons with reduced mobility. They shall not be discriminated against. 12.1.2 covers that. And for the family assistance and disclosures, you can move the slide, please. The authority here says that the airlines and the airports are supposed to provide assistance to air crash victims and their families. But I think there'll be some issues here, because for those who are the last NSIB, the Safety Investigation Bureau's review of their regulations, they are actually asking they want to coordinate. Well, this law is saying that the authority the NCA will facilitate the establishment. So I think there's a need for the two bodies to look at that area so we don't have conflict at time of providing assistance to the families of victims. Also, all carriers and airport operators shall develop and submit to the authority a family assistance plan. See that. Now, going to the rest of information, where all conditions to their passengers before they buy the ticket. All the airlines are supposed to provide information concerning the ticket. So, and I think that needs to be complied with. And coming on to the complaints procedure for the passengers, we are supposed to provide a copy of your airline ticket, a copy of the letter you have written to the carrier, any response from the carrier, and any other relevant document. But what do you find that rather than passengers making these reports, passengers would rather go to the social media. We need to develop this reporting procedure so that we can help the airlines and help passengers to have better facilities. And if we go further, you can see most of the complaints for the foreign airlines. You can see lost baggage, delayed flights, aircraft seat, hidden cost, customer services, cabin cleanliness, and refunds. Those are the major complaints that were found in the foreign airlines. I will come to Nigeria very soon. But before I go there, flight delay will definitely happen. What sets airlines apart is the response given to their passengers. And delays make airlines guilty until proven otherwise. Are airlines solely responsible for delays? I do not think so. Now look at the reasons given by the AON for delays in Nigeria. They've said weather, lack of basic navigation instruments at airports, inadequate aircraft parking spaces in Lagos, G80 and MM2 were cited, restriction at Sunset Airport. So at times some of their flights have to return because they cannot land. Delay due VIP movement. I hope the Honorable Minister will sit there to hear that. Delay due VIP movement. Frequent bed strike and foreign object damage. Unavailability of fuel, rising cost of fuel, unavailability of forex for spares and maintenance. I think they don't have addressed that. Delays from customers clearing of equipment, that has also been addressed. Poor air traffic flow, inadequate check-in counters, ingress and egress at the airports. Abuja was specifically mentioned there, and faulty carousels and inadequate ground support listed here, which is also optional out there. Now, if you look at that last one, the AP's chairman talked about the carousel in Abuja and how the staff would have to carry it on their head. And another reason they gave for this delay is unruly passengers. The unruly customer. The unruly customers, we put them into two groups: the unruly passenger and the unruly VIP. The unruly VIP is the one that will not allow himself to be searched. He will not go through the airport protocols before boarding the aircraft. They are the ones that outside Lagos Airport, they drive almost to the tarmac before they can board the aircraft. And these activities are damned to be unruly. Now, when we look at what are the rights of these airline passengers, the right to full value of money paid, the right to timely feedbacks in respect of complaints lodged with service, and the right to seek redress for irregularities during the flight. To seek redress for irregularities during the flight. One of those irregularities is the unruly passengers. So what makes our own unruly passenger different from what we obtain outside Nigeria? Look at it. Blocking the airlines from operating other flights due to the cancellation of their own flights. I still saw that last week in Abuja. Destroying the airline counters, failure to fasten seatbelt and standing up during taxiing, exceeding the carry-on baggage allowance, or failing to store baggage when required, verbal and physical abuse and intoxication, pilfering of passenger luggage, and jumping the queue and jumping to get luggage, disobeying crew briefing during disembarkation. These are all unruly acts that we have found within the system, and Part 19 as the losses has it there that that has a way of addressing it. But unfortunately, measures taken. It is important that the government and airlines have the necessary legal authority to prosecute unruly passengers. We have found that the problem is open prosecution, even when one is arrested or picked. You always see it on social media, and thereafter the story dies. There must be that diligence in prosecution so that you can deter others from getting unruly. Enforcement measures that reflect the severity of the incident should be activated. For this to happen, jurisdictional gaps must be eradicated, and effective coordination between airlines and responsible agencies. The United States, meanwhile, it's a country that has zero tolerance for unruly passengers, and got 8.5 million last year from fines given to unruly passengers. And also, sometimes when the crime becomes critical, they involve the FBI to help them in getting the unruly passengers to be prosecuted. But for airlines, I've also used to ban passengers from the banning of passengers and offshore. But the main problem with ban is that data protection laws make it difficult for airlines to share information, and individual bans can be circumvented with name changes and new passports. China and India are among the countries that have national bans and government-controlled lists of unruly passengers in place. Preventing or de-escalating incidents is obviously the preferred option. Yeah, in preventing, like I said earlier, we need to work on. It is more important to de-escalate than to wait till they get to the stage where we have to issue ban or get them arrested. Sharing best practices on this escalating incidents through manuals and training is equally vital. And IATA issued a new guidance document. I think that document should not only be given to the airlines, but also given to airline service providers for training of their staff. The increasing threat of physical abuse is particularly worrying, and government must enforce the law and penalize offenders. Passengers and crew are entitled to a safe and hassle-free experience on board. Conclusion: the consumer protection laws are sufficient for reporting, and implementation needs to improve. Coordination between the airlines and the appropriate government agencies is key in taming the unruly passenger menace. Priority should be de-escalating, as the laws are also sufficient, but coordination remains a problem. legal infrastructure can be a powerful tool for the transformation of the industry, provided the unique gaps are addressed so we don't have a loop. Thank you for having me, and good afternoon.
Thank you so much, Mr. Olumide, for that presentation. I really appreciate the information that you've shared with us this afternoon. Our time is fast spent, so I would, we have a couple of questions. So I'll just read out the questions, and then I'll ask any of the panelists to respond to them if they are comfortable with it. We have about 6 questions so far. So I would start with the first one. It says, since concession fees are a global standard, how can legislation help with the 7% gross revenue fees payable to FAN? I don't know if any of the panelists want to respond to this question. It says, since concession fees are a global standard, how can legislation help with the 7% gross revenue fees payable to FAN? Can any panelists help with this question? Is anybody from FAN around? Where is Mr. Moore? I don't think he's here. He's not here. Okay, so let me move to the next question. I think this is directed to Barrister Onyema. I don't know if he's still with us. The person here says, kindly request, okay, it says, kindly request Barrister Onyema to reconcile his viewpoint with the concerns of passengers vis-a-vis issues of delay and cancellation. I think he wants you to balance the interest of consumers with the concerns you raised about the activities of the regulators. So
well, thank you very much. You see, no airline wants to delay flights. When you delay flights, you're incurring a lot of unnecessary and unwanted costs that at the end of the day will not help the airline. No airline in this world. Let me tell you, I sent 10 of my staff to Antigua for a business meeting 4 days ago. They flew on one of the legacy airlines. They were supposed to use a 10:30 flight to St. Martin's, from St. Martin's to Antigua. They were in Heathrow up to 7 p.m. Nigerians were stranded in Heathrow up to 7 p.m. for over 9 hours. That flight was delayed. Nobody came to talk to them. All they were saying is just mind yourself, just look at the screens. Your flight is delayed. No boarding gate was given. They gave them 11:30, 5 o'clock. They put up 9 to look at the gates. Unlike in Nigeria, you're just looking at the airline, they're beating the boys and beating everybody inside. And they behaved themselves. When it was time and they were boarded after 9 hours, they offered them apologies. I'm not saying that was right, but sometimes we overheat this issue of cancellations and delays in Nigeria without asking the requisite question, cost it. Do airlines just want to delay flights for delaying sake? I'm very happy with Olumide's submissions. He went also out to talk about certain things that cause delays in Nigeria. He talked about unruly passengers. I will tell you one of the main reasons why airlines in Nigeria delay. For instance, if you have a 5 o'clock flight to Benin, remember, Benin is a sunset airport. They don't have, even if they have, it's not manned. Even if they have lights, not manned. Or let me use Owerri, for instance, the sunset airport. You have a 4 o'clock flight to Owerri. Unfortunately, for no reason, for no cause of the airline, there was weather, very bad weather in Owerri. En route weather, very bad. Now you delay that flight. That flight could have landed in Owerri and from there to Abuja. But there was weather en route and there was weather in Owerri. You cannot create good weather. You must safety and safety and safety. You cannot shortchange safety. Anything other than that, you're dead. Now the airline delays the flight. You inform the passengers, even as you're telling the passengers, some of them are beating your staff, saying that it's a lie. That somebody called them from Owerri that the weather is clear. He doesn't know about en route weather. He doesn't know that there are places you will pass through before you even get to Owerri. Even if the weather seems to him, he doesn't know whether there was an approaching wind shear coming to Owerri that could cause the kind of crash you had on Olisa. He doesn't know that. He just made a call to the airport and said, it's not raining here, the weather is clear. And they'll start beating people. They'll start beating people. And at the end of the day, because of weather, you find out that you may not be able to go into Owerri again because it's a sunset airport. That's not the fault of the airline. And they will start demanding that you put them in hotel. How do you put somebody in hotel for a force majeure, something that you didn't invent? You didn't invent weather. Nowhere is done for domestic operations. They demand that you put them in hotel. Now, what does the Aviation Convention say? The convention worldwide, if your schedule is disrupted as a passenger for any reason, especially this kind of reason, the airline will advise you to go and next available time. And that's exactly what you're supposed to do. No, not in Nigeria. Not in Nigeria. The next morning, there must be the first people you will fly. They'll tell you that their flight yesterday was delayed because of weather. You must fly them today. They must be the first people to fly. That's not how aviation is run. Because that their flight that was disrupted had already disrupted some other flights outside Owerri. And people in Abuja might be waiting for that plane. It has not come because the weather in Owerri disrupted the schedule. And the airline is blamed. Nobody sees that. The airline is blamed. Airline business is not run as if you put one plane in Owerri, put another one in Abuja, waiting so that if the weather in Lagos is bad, then you activate one in Owerri, carry the Abuja passengers, go and drop them. Then you keep another 4 planes in another location waiting so that it is not run like that. So some of the times when we, as so-called experts, talk, I wonder. So instead of the airlines knowing fully well that you're supposed to disrupt your schedule by flying these people that you didn't fly the previous night first, what the airlines do is to this. And once you do that, you've disrupted about 8 other flights in the morning. All over the world. If you have a 10 o'clock flight to Atlanta from Miami, another one, 11 o'clock from Atlanta to Miami, another one, 12 o'clock from Atlanta to Miami. If your 10 o'clock flight to Miami is disrupted for maybe a stormy weather or whatever, it does not affect those who are going to fly at 11. It does not affect them. If you touch the schedule, you disrupt a whole lot of flights. These are the things that happen in Nigeria. Except Nigerian, I've even told the DG of NCAA, I've told the Minister of Aviation before now, I told them, I'm ready, Allen Onyema, I'm ready to contribute to the education of Nigerian passengers. Unless Nigerian passengers are fully educated about the conventions ruling aviation, only that time we are going to have the kind of services we all crave for. These things are happening because of that. Now you talk about delays. One airline, Airpeace, had 26 best strikes between February and June. February, March, April, May, and June, 5 months. 26 best strikes. In every month, you have at least 5 best strikes. Each best strike can render your aircraft down for a month, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, because you don't have engine shop in Nigeria. So if you continue having these best strikes, it will definitely affect your operations. And this is an airline doing over 100 and something flights a day in the country. So his operations will be affected. There was a day we had 2 bird strikes in Benin. So whose duty is it to chase these birds? It's not the duty of the airlines. It's not the duty of the airlines. The present minister and the MD of FAN approached this before them and are trying to address this issue. FAN in the past didn't do what they were supposed to do. I'm happy we have a minister now who is ready to do that. It's not the airline to chase birds. If you have 26 bird strikes, those were 26 accidents. Fatal would be fatal accidents. But we thank God Almighty that nothing happened. The pilots were dexterous and God was on our side. The planes turned back and landed safely. But how about the engines? Each engine is costing nothing less than $2 million. Some 3.5, some 4 million. If it's a 777, it's about $10.2 million. And when you have these things grounded, that same day, all the places that aircraft go will be affected. You cannot recover. And that was why you are having all those delays. Now, what did we do in APs? Let me tell you. They are not only APs, all the airlines got together and decided that we have to do something. The infrastructure is giving us a back to do. What we did was to now drop flights below your capacity. If Airpeace flies the number of planes it has, we'll be doing about 160 flights. Then it is something at times now. Because you don't know when the next best strike will happen. So that you can now activate an aircraft to go to the destination and rescue people. Unless you'll be blamed for what you didn't cause. Now the cost is to the nation and to the airline. You don't buy planes to park on the ground. You don't look at passengers now. They are groaning under low capacity in the system. Not because there's no capacity, but because the airlines have decided to cut their flights so that you won't be blamed. But nowhere in the world do you park planes on ground waiting for unforeseen circumstances. You don't do that. You do buffer. Yes, you create some buffer, but not the kind of buffer we are creating now. So it's like the airline owners are taking the boat. Then you talk about, I had so many people talk about corporate governance. Yeah, my brother Alex Ruba touched on that too. He excused the airlines in one breath. It's another breath. When you say that other businesses survive in Nigeria in the same climate as aviation, that is not surviving. Aviation is not the same as those businesses. Aviation is not the same as those businesses. I run other businesses. I have other businesses. I'm still successful in my other businesses. They're not suffering. Why is aviation suffering? It's because it has its peculiarities that you dare not to touch. You can touch my other businesses. As a lawyer, your law firm does not need a foreign exchange to operate. Your airline needs 98% of dollar to operate. And when you don't get it, it affects you. So it is not true that because other businesses succeed, I have a real estate business. The dollar issue does not affect it. It doesn't affect it at all. But the aviation, the dollar issue.
I think we've lost this. Okay, Mr. Yema.
And
All right, so Yema, your
yes,
line
I'm hearing.
The line is breaking. I don't know if you're true, so that.
What? Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, what I was saying is, in actual fact, is that except we tell ourselves the truth, the problem is not even with corporate governance. Even though I agree that some, maybe 5% of it, but not in all. We have other businesses that are succeeding, but aviation has its own peculiarities. And if you touch these things wrongly or negatively, it will affect the productivity of every airline. And back to the customer issue, we need to educate Nigerian customers. We need a situation whereby your flight is delayed, or maybe the aircraft that will take you, or maybe there's weather in your destination causes some delays, and maybe you hear that the weather has improved and you will not allow other people to do their flight. It's only in Nigeria that people work to go and stop a moving plane on the apron. It is not done anywhere. It's not done. And because of fear of molestation, the airlines will now disrupt so many flights to do the unthinkable. The convention is, if something disrupts your 7 o'clock flight, it does not have any bearing on the person flying at 8. That's how it is done all over the world. But airlines in Nigeria will now compromise and say, okay, let me fly this route and take care of these other ones. The same for Sunset Airports. By evening, you cannot get in there. So what do? You delay Port Harcourt, delay Kano, delay Lagos, delay Abuja, because those are airports that fly 24 hours. You try to rescue Owerri, rescue Enugu, and rescue maybe Gombe, and some other places. Majority of them don't have airfield lights at night. Or even when they have, they are not manned. They close shop by 6 o'clock. In the morning, you're talking about delays. You have a 7 o'clock into Asaba. By morning, 9 minutes, you've not gotten weather. You've not gotten weather. They must come to work. They come to work at 7 o'clock. That is when they now give the pilot the weather conditions around there before you take off. You don't have to board passengers because you don't know if they're going to give you negative weather conditions. So let us face facts. The Nigerian airline is going through a lot. It's going through a lot. And I'm an entrepreneur, a proud one. I have other businesses bigger than the airline. They're not suffering. So you have to address the peculiarities in aviation before you can get it right.
Yeah, thank you so much, Barrister Onyema, for that response. Let me go to the next question. I think the question is directed at Commodore Ademola Onitiju. And the person here wants to know what models of PPP would any of the speakers, particularly recommend for the Nigerian aviation industry. Did you get the question, sir? What model of PPP would you recommend for the aviation industry in Nigeria? That's the question.
The easiest one is the BOT, build, operate, and transfer.
Okay.
But before you get shortlisted, you must have demonstrable competence. You must have good antecedents for kindred business management. So build it, operate it with those credentials, and then transfer. I think that should be the best I would recommend.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir. Then I have one for Mr. Olumide. The question here is, it says, what is the options available to a customer whose flights was cancelled without notice and wants a refund immediately? Mr. Olumide, still with us?
Yes, I would you.
Yes.
Well, what I would advise that you don't have to be unruly. If your flight is cancelled without notice, I stated the process of reporting there. You take your ticket. You write to the airline. Writing to the airline with the response you get from the airline, and other documents you take and present to the NCAA to start the process. But you see, the problem we have here is that most times they spend so much time in discussing on the social media or running to the press rather than going through that process. It's when you go through that process that you can get the appropriate compensation as demanded by the law.
Thank you for that answer. Then I have one for Cindy. The question here is, can our domestic airlines synergize more in the area of code sharing to address the negative economic impacts of flight delays and cancellations? Cindy, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. The answer is yes, they could. They also have tried. We've seen Dana and Ibom Air create some sort of, reprotect agreement between them. Spring Alliance, which was an AON initiative, was supposed to help with these cancellations. But I think one of the problems is we don't have a domestic clearinghouse for aviation funds. Most of the airlines are not participating in the IATA clearinghouse, and so it makes it difficult. One suggestion would be for them to create some sort of virtual interline which would mean that they could sell tickets on other airlines without an official code sharing agreement between those specific partners. It can be done through different technology platforms. But yeah, definitely code sharing is something that is a tool which is used by airlines around the world. It's not being used here, but I think it's a trust issue. It's an accountability issue, it's a transparency issue, and it's a clearing issue. So until those things are resolved, it will continue to become a problem.
Okay, thanks, Cindy. Then I have a question for Dr. Alex. Dr. Alex Muba, sorry, for Dr. Alex Muba. And the question goes thus, says, how can we identify and deal with personal interests that seem to be weaved into the operations of institutions that undermine the interest of the generality of Nigerians? Is Dr. Muba still with us?
Yes, I'm very much here.
How can we identify and deal with personal interests that seem to be weaved into the operations of institutions that undermine the interest of the generality of Nigerians?
It's that animal we refuse to tame, corporate governance. And so when I talk about ideas we can borrow from the financial service industry, there's nobody bigger than them in this economy. And there used to be a regime of personal interest and personal operations, and that has transmuted to the kind of corporate structures within that sector, which is what I said we can borrow in the aviation industry. Once you have competent governance processes in place, it checkmates personal interest and checkmates the conduct of business in a manner that is not appropriate for the interest of the business. Let's be honest, and I don't think Nigerians seem to understand the issue, and this is good that this is a law forum. A business is not its owner. When you own an airline, it doesn't make the business yours. The law creates the entity of a corporate structure in order to separate the business from the owner and the owner from the business. So if we can't do it in a personal, in a manner that is appropriate on a personal level, then that's where legislation may come in. Maybe these airlines will all be public companies, so they are forced to address the matters on a non-personal level. So really, the only solution for us is the regulator steps in to enforce corporate governance principles, which can be done because the regulator is in that function able to do so, or we transmute these organizations into public companies and force upon them these corporate governance principles. I sit on a couple of public companies, and really you have committees to look at every issue, even the hiring process, promotion process, salary process. They can't be done on whim and based on the fact that I own the business. And that is the challenge that we need to address in this sector to enable it to grow.
Dr. Muba, I will now invite our managing partner, Mrs. Ezekiel, to give us our closing remark or vote of thanks. I don't know if Mrs. Yvonne is on.
Yes. I'd like to say something, please, before she closes.
Okay.
Yeah, I listened to my brother Alex Muba. I think the question, the person asking that question, I think what the person meant, agencies who control the airlines. That was the question. That was the question that person was asking. But I think Alex was dwelling necessarily on the airlines. What the asker or whoever asked that question was thinking of government agencies. He said, what would happen? Well, how do we use legislation to make them to conform, to stop disturbing businesses and do the right thing? But he veered and was talking about airlines. And the truth is, some of these airlines imbibe true good governance. Some of them. And when you say you have a governing board, they will come out and say, oh, it must be your friends, your family and friends that you were appointed. You know, we are offended by these insinuations. We are offended by these institutions. Some of us have governing boards that we do not control. For instance, in APs, you have the former MD of Shell. Who controls Mutu tomorrow? Who will control him? You have another MD of one of the Shell subsidiaries. There. You have a former DG of NCA. There. You have a senior advocate of that. These are independent-minded people taken from different parts of the country. And for everything we do, we control to them. But when they talk, they say, even the ones that have is family and friends. So all these angst and observations people have about Nigerian Airlines. Nigerian Airlines will never grow when everybody is fighting them. Nobody gives them a chance. Nobody wants to listen to the salient things that are drowning them. Instead, is either somebody proposes merger tomorrow that you have to force them. You have to force them. Now, Alex Fuba, my brother, is talking about maybe forceful legislation to make them go public. You see, we can't pick and choose. The industry has been deregulated. You can't, in 21st century Nigeria, start using legislation to become public entities.
I have to respond to that. I'm sorry.
You don't force it. You don't force.
Sorry, let me come in here. Sorry.
I answered the question I was asked.
Mr. Onyema, I don't think Mr. Muba was specific on Nigerian Airlines. He was just simply saying that it would help.
We had him. No. He was talking about the airlines. He was talking about the airlines.
That point, but I don't think he was specific. I think if we keep going back and forth on this, we may not be able to end this webinar. I think, yes, I get your point that there is a need. Okay.
Can I just make a point? I'm sorry.
Okay, you can go ahead.
You. My paper emphasizes, if you listen to my paper, that we cannot force mergers. We cannot force businesses to conduct themselves in a way that private enterprises do not want to enter. The question I was asked was specific. I did not read the comment to which the chairman is referring to, that a different question was asked. I was asked a specific question about how you separate private interest from business interest, and that is the specific answer that I answered to. Also, in answering that question, I'm not speaking to any particular airline. I'm speaking in a very general sense with regard to business, in which I indicated that a business is not the owner and the owner is not the business. And so I have been very specific and I've told the line of the fact. This is not a personal exchange. And so I'm just wanting to emphasize that my point was there was no discussion ever about forced mergers. And I stated it clearly that you cannot force mergers, you cannot force businesses to cooperate with each other in a private sense if they choose not to do so. So please, I would like the chairman's view corrected in view of the real facts that I presented. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much for the clarification. I now call on Ms. Ezekiel to give us the vote of thanks.
Well, our discussions are very spirited and interesting, and we can go on forever. We have a global audience, so I will start by saying good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where in the world you're joining us from. Ladies and gentlemen, I have no doubt that you agree with me that we have had an exciting, informative, and interesting session on repositioning the aviation sector for revenue generation and growth and the role of legislation. This could not have been possible without the presence of our esteemed participants. So we give our immeasurable thanks to our Honorable Minister, Festus Keyamo, to our special guests, keynote speakers, all our speakers and panelists. We thank you all for your presence at this webinar and for sharing your thoughts and knowledge with us. For instance, there was a suggestion that this topic should have been called legislative revolution, for the singular reason that legislation is much needed to make positive seismic changes the industry so desperately needs that will lead to its growth. We all know that the aviation sector has a significant role to play in any economy. We also learned that we need to enact policies that will enhance the safety, and that Nigeria does not lack laws, and that we are signatories to many treaties. What we just need to do is have laws that are streamlined to meet today's international standards. We've also heard about the impact of investment in the industry, that liberalization helps with market access and attracts investments. So our Honorable Minister also stated that he would want stakeholders to deepen its collaboration with the ministry in order to help it drive it for change. Our firm, Olisa Agbakoba Legal, is dedicated to the development of regulatory framework to manage and regulate aviation activities in Nigeria. We are arguably leaders in aviation law and one of the few law firms doing this because we know how the development and growth of the aviation industry can contribute to revenue generation for the government and can impact socioeconomic development. And we are committed to developing the right regulatory framework to support this. We'd also like to thank our wonderful audience for signing up and being great participants. Finally, I'd like to thank our team, the team at OAL, who worked very hard to put this together and to ensure its success. So I thank you all very much for participating. Now, if you haven't answered your questions here, we'll try to do so and put it up on our website, www.oal.law, on our government relations and public sector webpage. I encourage you to visit our website. Now, tomorrow is a public holiday, so we wish everyone a very good celebration and rest. Thank you all once again for joining us and being part of this wonderful webinar. Thank you all and goodbye.
Thank you and goodbye.